Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Dental Board of California meeting. I am Dr. Alan Felsenfeld and serve as the president of the board. Today is Friday, May 19th, 2023. This board meeting is being held in person. This is an official business meeting of the Dental Board of California. Depending on the number of people who would like to testify on a particular agenda item, a total time limit may be imposed. We will ask all speakers to please stay on topic and not repeat testimony already provided. If you agree with the testimony already provided, you may state your name and that you are in support of the comments previously made. If a time limit is determined to be necessary, please keep your comments within that time frame. I would like to call the meeting to order now and ask the board secretary to please call the roll.
Good morning, Dr. Loreen, Board Secretary. I will call the roll. Chan?
Chan, present.
Chan, present. Felsenfeld?
Felsenfeld, present.
Felsenfeld, present. Forge?
Forge present.
Forge, present. Larin, present. McKenzie?
Here.
Present. McKenzie, Medina, absent. Molina?
Present. Molina.
Molina, present. Olage?
Olagi present.
Olage, present. Pacheco?
Pacheco here.
Pacheco, present. Thakur, she's on her way. She just called, so I will, for absent. Absent,
you.
okay, thank you.
She's absent at this point. Thank you.
And you is absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Dr. Loreen. I will now move on to item 23 on the agenda, the President's report on closed session items. The board met in closed session last night, and we did three things. We adopted a proposed decision for a dentist JD. We discussed and took action on a decision after reconsideration for a dentist MP, and we heard an update on pending litigation. Is there any public comment? Seeing none. Yesterday, we postponed item 13, the report of the Dental Assisting Council, because they were doing some work to get this report put together correctly and with the information that was done at the meeting. So we're going to ask Ms. Tracy Reed Espinoza to come up and give the report.
Good morning, President, Vice President,
A little
and
louder,
board.
please turn your mic on and into it.
It says it's on. Are you okay? Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning, board. My name is Tracy Reed Espinoza. I'm the chair of the DAC. And I have a few items to go over with you guys and give you a review of what our findings were yesterday. Agenda item number 4, Tracy Montez, the executive officer, gave us a report. No action was required. Item number 5, Ms. Parks did an update on dental assisting exams. No action was required. Agenda item number 6, Ms. Parks gave an update on the RDA EF exams. No action was required. Item agenda number 7, Ms. Parks gave an update on the course applications and approvals for on-site visitation. Mrs. Parks advised us that they will be conducting 30 site visitations and evaluations monthly. No action was required. Agenda item number 8, the DAC motioned to do a revision on 1601.1, changing the composition of the board to be 8 dentists, 1 being a faculty member of a California dental college, 1 hygienist, and changing the dental assistants from 1 to 3, 1 RDA for 5 years experience with a current license, 1 EF, 5 years experience, current licensed, 1 faculty member, 5 years experience from a board certified program on a dental assisting, 5 public members. The statement that Ms. Pachenko and I agreed on in regards to this, bringing this forward, was that we work together better as a team, since we all work together for the safety of the dental community. At this time, we ask that you please look at that in the future on your board conversation. On amendment section 1740, the DAC rejected the request to consider the dissolving of the DAC council. As the DAC represents DAs, RDAs, RDAEFs, ortho assistant, anesthesia assistant, we respectfully request as the board that you consider this action to be not be dissolved. On agenda number 9, AB 481, this was very concerning because we were given this legislation in regards to the bill, and it seemed that there were a lot of things that were put in this that had been retracted, and we were not updated on this legislation. So for us to move forward with everything seemed rather problematic. However, we did have some ideas in regards to this area on what was in there at the present day. Section 1753.1, area 22 through 27, the active duties for an EF. Those were all implemented and then erased. So we spoke with Wendy. She came up front and stated that was an error. We just want to make sure that you understand that we don't want any changes to the EF program at all, and we don't want any deductions from the EF program. Section 53.1, 25 to 26, no deleting of any duties. The DAC also advised Wendy of that. She stated that they were going to do changes for corrections. On 1755B, number 2, we recommended instead of no more than to be replaced with minimum of 2 hours in a laboratory instructions, and also to replace using with may include video and or series of video training tools. On 1741A, apprenticeship dental assistant program be replaced with California apprenticeship dental program. And section B, accredited, approved by U.S. Department of U.S. Education, be changed to California Division standards. On 1741E, adding verbiage, we would request that it says examinations in the clinic chair of assistants, infection control and radiation health and safety administered by Dental Assistants National Board, satisfaction maintaining a certification satisfactory to the terms and conditions of Dental Assistant National Board. On 1741O, preceptee means an unlicensed dental assistant who is employed by a California dentist. We would like to add dental facility as a participating apprenticeship, such as a VA or Native American clinics. On 1748D4 states the compliance of the board approved course for coronal polishing, which shall not be performed on a patient until licensee as an RDA is obtained. This conflicts with 1750.14D, which states upon completion and issuance of a certification of coronal polishing, the dental assistant may polish coronal surfaces of teeth deemed necessary by a supervising dentist prior to the patient being released. This concludes my report by the DAC. Thank you for your time. Is there any questions?
Thank you. Is there any board member discussion? I'm sorry, I see Ms. Welch. Did you want to go first, and then Dr. Montes?
There were a couple additional issues that were raised. There's concern for staff time in reviewing. Can we 300 hours of courses in dental assisting related topics. This would be in connection with the Preceptee pathway. The board regulations, 16 CCR 1016 subsection G, authorizes CE credits to be issued in half-hour increments. So staff could be having to review 600 CE certificates to ensure that the applicant has eligibility under this requirement. We're concerned about how the staff time for this review would be covered by the application fees for this pathway. So we're thinking that it's likely that this particular pathway, the application fee should be higher than the application fee for the other types of pathways. That change would need to be made in Business and Professions Code Section 1725 with a corresponding regulation change in 16 CCR 1022 for the RDA application. Please keep in mind that regulations take, right now they're taking at least 2 years to implement. So until a fee is set for that RDA pathway, we wouldn't be able to issue licenses for that pathway. So that's going to be a bit of a process. Another alternative is just to set the fee in the statute for that pathway so that it could be issued upon the effective date of the bill. Another concern was scanning and imaging. 1750.1 subsection or subdivision A. Right now, intraoral impressions performed by unlicensed dental assistants requires direct supervision of a dentist. This bill would change that and move intraoral impressions to be effectively performed through digital scanning under general supervision. And there's just a consumer protection concern there, whether or not it's appropriate for unlicensed dental assistants to be performing digital intraoral impressions for orthodontic appliances, because this bill would change that. In addition, this provision, 1750.1 A1, kind of contradicts itself because it would authorize the unlicensed dental assistant to perform the scanning and imaging for orthodontic records only. I'm not really sure what that means, and I know staff wouldn't know what that means, because if you're going to perform the scan, it's typically for a diagnostic tool to be used for the dentist to diagnose, create a written treatment plan, then use that written treatment plan for fabrication and manufacture of the orthodontic appliance. So this duty is really important because it sets up the ultimate orthodontic appliance that's going to be placed in the patient's mouth. So we've just been raising this concern. Mary McCune with CDA indicated yesterday the bill is going to be amended to completely strike the changes for scanning and imaging. So this may not be a concern, but until that language change has been made, we're still raising the concern.
Thank you. Dr. Montez?
Yes, just a quick clarification. I know we were talking about a lot of numbers yesterday, but we are doing 30 audits per month. The number of site visits is to be determined. So I just wanted to clarify that for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other board comment? Is there any public discussion on this right now? Let me say one other thing. Come on up, Ms. Becker. One other thing. We are going to be actually getting back to this when we talk about our legislative activities at the back end of the meeting. So, go ahead.
Good morning. Sherry Becker, representing the Alliance, California Dental Assistants Association, California Association of Dental Assisting Teachers, and California Association of Extended Functions. In regards to agenda item number 8 from the DAC meeting yesterday, regarding the repeal of 1742, as the current council structure requires board staff to schedule council meetings, coordinate council member travel, and prepare council meeting agendas and associated materials. All separate from the quarterly board meetings, these actions are burdensome and costly, and in addressing that, this is the board's charge to coordinate meetings. If the cost is a main issue, we're suggesting raising the fees, as fees hadn't been raised since 2016. Fees really need to be appropriate to support the board. Also, the DAC was formed to replace COMDA and to have representation for all dental assisting, to include the unlicensed dental assistant RDAs, the EFs, the OAs, the DSAs, and educators. The proposed language to have 2 RDAs on the board will not adequately represent all areas of dental assisting and not possibly fulfill the duties of the 7-person DAC. An appointed 2-person committee representing dental assistant potentially introduces lack of transparency, especially with no public notice, effective communication, and lack of expertise, including the breadth of experience. So the Alliance strongly opposes this change. However, it does support the motion presented by the DAC to retain the DAC and to add the 2 additional RDAs to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? We are, one more time, we are not, no, you come up if you wish, please, I don't want to stop you from doing that. We are not actually going to make any voting or action on the bill right now. We are going to consider it later. The kind of information we're starting to hear is important, I believe, later. I know it was said yesterday, and this is just a report of what went on, and the actual consideration will come later in the meeting. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Esther Cruz. I'm representing myself as a registered dental assistant. I would like to add language to 1750.1 in radiology. Dental assistants allowable topics, radiology, proper technique, extraoral, and 3D imaging, with an addition of continuing education requirement added to the regulatory. Currently, there is no radiology continuing education, and there is an increase in missed diagnostic areas of concern in California, and the proper role in meeting the standard of care for proper interpretation of imaging includes either transcribing the dentist finding or transferring the images, example given, DICOMs, in a HIPAA-safe manner to an oral and maxillofacial radiologist. The practice is responsible for assuring Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, a compliance in all correspondence via web portal, and also including 45 CFR and 164.50E of the privacy regulations and 45 CFR 164.314A, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. All data collected by the equipment must be encrypted and securely stored to prevent unauthorized access. And the bill should also require all dental professionals and staff to be properly trained on data security protocols to ensure the safety of patient data. In addition, the bill provides a clear process for reporting and addressing any potential data breaches, including timely notification and affected parties. The bill should further ensure that no data will be transferred without the user's consent, as required by HIPAA regulations. The dental radiology equipment bill should be dedicated to ensuring the privacy and security of user data and will hold accountable any individuals or organizations found violating these provisions.
All right, thank you very much. We're getting close to the 2-minute mark. These comments, can we have them? Because you went through a whole bunch of things that we would like to see, certainly.
Yes.
So, and you can bring them to us. And again, we're going to be discussing this later as we take action of any kind on the bill. Okay? Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you very much. All right. We're going to move on.
Thank you, Board.
We're going to move on to item 24A, Report of the Commission Dental Competency Assessment, Western Regional Examining Board, and the Council of Interstate Testing Agency, the CDCA Reb, CETA to the initials. And I'm going to ask, and I apologize, I think we met, and I know your name, but I don't recall it, so who are you?
It's a secret. Yeah.
I want to ask Miss, this is a secret, to give a report on that.
My name is Shayna A.V. Overfelt. Most of you have talked to me either via phone or email. I first want to commend the staff. I'm here to present on behalf of CDCA Reb CETA. I am a dental assistant, so the conversation is very encouraging to hear. But to tell you how fantastic the staff has been to work with has been phenomenal. So I just want to give them a quick commending. We do have a presentation. Dr. Guy Champagne, who you are used to seeing, is at an exam in Jamaica. Dr. Bruce Horn, my backup, is at the exam at Desai in Mexico. So I got to be the third choice for you today to present on what's going on with CDCA Reb CETA. Next slide. So first thing we want to talk about really quickly is the ADEX simulated patient exam is now indicated and accepted in every state that you see that is purple. Okay, we have New York, who is still gray, and Delaware, who is still gray. New York is a residency state, and Delaware still administers their own exam in a neighboring state because they don't have a dental school currently. So you can see that simulated patient has now pretty much covered the nation. It is 99% of the exam types we are giving across the country. Next slide. The other thing we're starting to highlight and really have a conversation about is that the ADEX examination in these states that you see are purple are the pathway by licensure for examination for dental and some dental hygiene. This is focused on dental at the moment. So all the states you see in purple for licensure by examination either require the ADEX exam in full or a component of the ADEX exam, which would be our written OSCE examination. So we are watching states grow, and California is one of those states by happenstance with the merger of CDCA and REB that then made it an ADEX acceptance. Next slide. This is every school that we test across the country. This is dental and hygiene represented on this map. So you can see we have examiners from coast to coast every weekend performing examinations. And this is something that is a nationally accepted licensure examination. Next slide. Just a quick overall landscape. This is my area of expertise. This is where I focus. I have been to all 6. I have not been to California North State yet, but I have been to all dental schools. I present to the dental students and dental faculty, helping everybody get on board to prepare for the exam. There are currently 71 dental schools in the United States. 4 of them are just opening, and all 67 dental schools in the United States offer the ADEX examination. And then you can see we have a very strong upcoming of 8 more dental schools across the country. Next slide. I wanted to report to you the transition that we've made here in California. We had 3 schools previously that were administering ADEX prior to the merger of CDCA Reb and now, of course, CETA. We had 3 schools to transition to work in partnership with to help get faculty and students on board with the ADEX examination and some of the criteria differences. So site visits were made to Loma Linda, to Western, and to UCLA. And then in addition, USC, University of Pacific, who actually has their exam going on now, and University of California, San Francisco. Also in the last 2 years, this year and last year, the Dental Suite, hosted by CDA, sorry, that's hard to not put the extra C in there, has invited us to participate. So I have been the face sitting there talking to the dental students as they come through during this wonderful convention that you're hosting just up the street. And then, of course, not to mention, you guys also accept licensure from the school in Mexico, and we are there this weekend administering that examination. Also important to note for ADEX, just a side note, we are now in Saudi Arabia. They have also brought the ADEX exam in we will travel there to their schools and administer the ADEX exam for those students as well. Next slide. just this is really for Dr. Montez and Ms. Welsh. There are no changes coming to the ADEX dental licensure exam. We do have an occupational analysis that will be coming up in the next 2 years, so that will be evaluated. And then the national standard, of course, that has been set by California and many states, we believe has been met by the ADEX dental licensure examination. So main thing Dr. Champagne wanted to make sure I noted once again was there were no changes coming to the ADEX dental examination. Next slide. It had come across my desk that California is interested or would like more information on becoming a member state, not only of CDCA REBSITA, but also of ADEX. So I'm presenting that here today. You can see all the states that are gold in this map are member states. What that, and you can go to the next slide, what that means for them is that they participate in the governance of our organization. So CDCA REBSITA is governed by our member states. There is no cost to participate in this. We do host annual meetings. I believe California participated this year in Texas. Our upcoming meetings are listed here. Louisville, Dallas, Texas, and San Diego will be an exciting one. You do have, as an active board member, from when you join, active board members will have voting rights. And those voting rights at this time last forever until you withdraw from the organization. Each active and licensed state board member can participate as examiners. I understand this state may not allow you, as you're a sitting board member, to be examiners, but once you are finished with your term on the board, you can then become an examiner and serve. And those expenses are reimbursed from CDCA REBSITA, as well as those who attend the annual meeting. Those expenses are also reimbursed. Examiners are paid an honorarium, and there are 3 seats available for participation on our steering committee, which is one of our guiding bodies next to our board of directors. The next membership, and you can go to the next slide, Marilla, the next membership is ADEX. So while CDCA REBSITA is the functioning body that administers the ADEX exam, the ADEX organization is the organization of state board members who develop the content, scoring, and criteria of the exam. So that's where the decisions about what content and when that occupational analysis is complete, what will be instituted into the examination itself. Once again, there is no obligation to no cost, or you do have an obligation to participate if you're part of ADEX, but there's no cost to you as a member state. There are 37 member states that meet annually, and they determine and review how the exam is performed in content, scoring, and criteria. ADEX is transitioning to sync their meetings with ours, so you will see them in Louisville with us at the next annual meeting in 2024. It is one board member representative will be assigned to the examination committee, and another board member representative assigned to the board of directors of ADEX. And I believe that, oh, and this was just something fun. Dr. Mark Christensen, who you all may also be aware of from the former REB organization, was just published in the CDA journal on the changing face of dental licensing examinations. It takes you back through the merging, well, actually goes back pretty far, and then talks about the merging process and where we are today, particularly based on the map. So if you haven't seen it, please do check it out. And now I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Overfelt, and I apologize for not knowing your name earlier. I would like to start with a question. These exams have been going on, and over the years, we've been hearing about your fancy tooth model.
Yep.
I'm an oral surgeon,
Yes.
bear with me, okay?
Yes.
Dr. Champagne is an exception. But about your tooth model, and so on and so forth. The passing rates have been very good, as they should be, because our dental students are being trained well, so we don't expect high failure rates. Where are we now? There are some rumors on the street that failure rates are no longer 5%, but they're dropping down to 20 and 30%. Is that correct?
I think it depends on how you look at the examination data, right? We take it by procedure instead of by the entire exam. So schools will take the entire exam, and if they have a student who's unsuccessful in the single component, they get tallied into this section of unsuccessful. But we are not seeing a huge drop in procedure-based as we look at it across the country. The one procedure that has shown a little bit of deficiency is the posterior restoration. We are attributing that to the Compident tooth, our technology, that it has somewhat become a process where each candidate is getting a tooth that we have deemed has appropriate caries, that it's no longer a small incipient lesion that wants the removal of caries, right? They are actually doing a diagnosis of the tooth and determining if caries has been removed based on the treatment they've rendered that day in the clinic chair.
So let me take that one step further from
Yep.
my standpoint. Yes, okay, so there's 6 or 7 parts to the exam, and
Yep.
you might pass six of them and not the 7th. That's what you're talking about.
Yep.
I guess I'm talking about if 100 kids take this exam, I'm assuming they're all just getting out of dental school. If 100 people just take this exam, how many of them actually get their license right then and there within that exam period? Is it 95 of them, or is it 45 of them, or 55? That's my question.
So on your question, right, we have integrated the examination process into their educational platform. So once they take that first component, if they're unsuccessful and the scheduling has been done properly, they will take that second attempt before they graduate. If they needed a retake, that allows time for remediation. We do not believe at this moment in doing on-site remediations if you're or on-site retakes. If you're unsuccessful during that first exam, right, we will come back at our expense. We administer that exam. Faculty, and bear with me just a second because I know where you're heading. Faculty has an opportunity to remediate if necessary. If remediation wasn't necessary and it was, as students like to say, a bad day, then if it was a bad day, they still have an opportunity to retake at our next exam at no cost to them. So we are coming back and supporting the students through the process. Once we get through that second process, we are seeing our numbers up into the 90% range. The first time, and again, back to scoring, some examinations will run, if you're unsuccessful on Saturday, they will retest you on Sunday, and then they give you the results all joined together on Monday, right? So the numbers look a little different. If we were to do the same thing, our numbers would look the same. We just divide it up based on examination. So I would say we're seeing 90%, 95, 96% pass rate after a remediation if necessary.
Because it's a full curriculum integrated format is what
It
you're
is.
suggesting.
It is a full curriculum integrated format.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other board discussion, any other questions from the board? Seeing none, is there any oh, what's that? Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Lorin.
Hi,
You have to
thank
raise your
you.
card or your hand higher, I'm sorry. There you go.
I would just like to know what the procedure is for California to become a member state.
Yes, and thank you for asking. It's as simple as sending an email. Marilla has my email, so saying that California would like to become a member state. We would then gather the board's information and get them into our system. It's a simple email that just asks to be a part of the organization, as well as for ADEX. I can provide Marilla with the contact for ADEX to also make that request.
Thank you. Dr. Chan?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Is there tracking of candidates that are successfully passing the exam? How many come from outside of California?
I could get that back to you. I don't have it off the top of my head exactly how many come from outside of Cal. Being that we're in every dental school, that's a lot, possibly. And I will be honest with, just to give you some more data, right? When students are taking the ADEX exam because of the portability, they often say California and Florida are their number one reasons of trying to get somewhere. So when we do, and Texas, California, Texas, and Florida are their highlights of where they may be looking to practice and why ADEX is valuable to them. Does that help? Okay.
Thank you. Any other board comment? All right, we were about to go to public comment. Is there any public comment on this presentation? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Overfield. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It is wonderful to see you all in
Look forward
person.
to seeing you again. I would like the record to show that Dr. Thakur has joined us, and if you'll put that into the attendance. Thank you very much, and good morning, Dr. Thakur. Sorry I didn't acknowledge that a little earlier. We are now up to item 25, if I'm not mistaken, and we are looking on a discussion of and possible action on the OPES survey regarding the use of local anesthesia and nitrous oxide in procedures performed by RDAEFs. Dr. Montez, I think, is going to give us an update as to where we are.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Tracy Montez. Just a reminder that at the February 2023 meeting, the council discussed the survey information. Specifically, OPS gathered results from the surveys that were administered to California licensed RDAEFs and dentists and provided a breakdown between their responses. Based on the survey responses, OPS found that the responses from the RDAEFs and dentists to the survey were consistent. Both of them reported that the administration of local anesthesia was required for a significant proportion of procedures performed by RDAEFs. Both also reported that RDAEFs spent the majority of their time performing the procedures, and additional local anesthesia was frequently required. Both the majority of RDAEFs and dentists who supervise RDAEFs supported expanding their scope of practice to allow them to administer local anesthesia and nitrous oxide after receiving specialized training. The complete results and full report of the survey were attached to the item, and the memo is included here. And so there were a number of letters discussing the survey, a number of opposition letters. Those were also included and posted. And basically, the council approved a motion to submit the survey results to the board for review. And so the action requested is that the board review the OPS findings in relation to the administered survey, and the board can determine whether or not to take any further action. And again, we did attach the memorandum and survey results for your consideration and review as requested by the Dental Assisting Council. So at this point, again, we've discussed this at a number of meetings, and the Dental Assisting Council is looking for some direction on possible next steps. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any board member discussion on this issue? Seeing none, is there a motion to do something with this? Ms. Luggy?
Just comments, maybe, because I know we have new board members too.
A little louder
Oh,
into the
I know we
mic,
have new board members too, so Dr. Felsenfeld, please jump in, and Dr. Chan, I know you've been around, but 5 years ago, this was on the table for conversation, as I recall. My successor, her entire, I think, terms too, was on the table, same conversations. Data has been renewed, or surveys have been renewed and presented at the DAC and at the board, but in my outlook, there's been little movement forward. So it's been kind of a whirlwind of conversations, staying in the same place. I want us to consider, I do think this is relevant and important, but us consider maybe revisiting this in 2024, giving us some time. So that would be my motion, is for us, our action to be
So you would like to, just to restate that for you, you'd like to thank you. You'd like to postpone this action to a meeting in 2024, is that what you're asking for?
correct, Dr. Felsenfeld.
Okay, is there a second? Dr. Chan? Dr. Chan is seconding that. All right, is there any further discussion on the motion on behalf of the board members? Dr. Montez would like to speak to that a little bit?
Yes, I would like to just package this perhaps with the dental assisting regulations that have been tabled, so that when, again, we take this global look at things, we can add this to part of the pieces for consideration. Again, yes, because we have this list, and we know there's some very important things that we need to do, but rather than piecemeal them, let's package it up and see if we can then bring it to a meeting like that. Thank you.
Ms. Welch?
We've got some background in the meeting memo on this, and it seems that Joan Greenfield brought this issue to the council back in 2018, and I think at the time they were searching for Greenfield brought this to the council in 2018. They were looking for support to expand the duties of RDAEFs in administration of nitrous oxide. Also included in the meeting memo is a statement from me, brought up at the DAC meeting where this survey was discussed. The board typically does not sponsor an expansion of duties. They don't do that. You guys are typically concerned about consumer protection and process, how to administer, but you're not involved in expansion of scope of duties. And what they're seeking is an expansion of scope of duties. So one of the things that was discussed was, all right, well, let's take a survey to see if this is even a good idea. Do the professionals want this ability? That survey has been completed. There has been objection to the survey that it wasn't large enough in scope of the professionals that were surveyed because it was limited to dentists and RDAEFs. I don't have an opinion on that. That's not my job, but I'm just pointing out that, there's information now that stakeholders could utilize to take to the legislators and seek a scope expansion bill themselves, but that's not typically what the board does. So I'm a little unclear for staff meeting material purposes. If this is brought back in 2024, what is the discussion? If you could clarify what meeting materials would need to be prepared so you could have a full discussion.
No, okay, I understand. So, Dr. Montez, if we layer this, can you explain where would this fall into that? Because I think that's where we're going. That would be where this needs to be.
Right, and what I'd like to do again is look at the dental assisting regulation package that was shelved, look at what was done, what's being done with 481, how this may fit into it, and any other pieces of information that are out there. Because again, as I continue to work at the board, I'm finding bits and pieces of projects that have been started, that have been tabled. But again, many of them are related to dental assisting. So what I need to do is some time to sort through that and then bring it together. So the meeting minutes or the meeting agenda item would be an update on the dental assisting regulations, and then maybe fold this into it as possible recommendations. And it would go to the DAC first with possible recommendations on next steps. And again, it could be, as Tara mentioned, this is scope. It's not suitable for this time, but others could use that information to sponsor a bill or not. But again, I just think it's premature because we're doing these little pieces. It's taking a lot of time. We need to step back, pull everything together, and especially with 481, see what happens.
Thank you. Any other board comment? All right. We have a motion, and we'll take public comment in just one moment. Do you want to read the motion to us before we vote? Microphone, please, and loudly.
The motion is to revisit this action until 2024.
Okay, and that's been seconded. Any additional board comment now that the motion's up for the vote? Is there any public comment? Okay, Ms. Becker, you're first, and who's that behind you? Tuka? Okay.
Sherry Becker, can you hear me? Sherry Becker, representing the Alliance. We encourage continued conversation and understand about scope of practice, discussion, and how it needs to be routed. But we encourage continued conversation, as it has been part of conversation for quite some time, to be able to move forward on this. So thank you.
That will be happening. Good morning.
Morning. Tuka Zokai, representing the California Dental Association. We also support the motion and the information that Tara Welsh shared in her legal expertise. If the survey does continue to move forward with the package into 2024, just to make sure that it is clear that there are leading and biased questions within the survey that was conducted, especially a question where RDAEFs were asked about the potential patient benefits. That has clear confirmation biased language. So as the package moves forward with the questionnaire, just to be clear on the way that the questions were asked for the survey results and the biases within them. But we support, again, continued discussion on this motion.
Thank you. As a general rule, no, go ahead. As a general rule, when we are going to postpone an issue or a motion like this, we're going to take all of the information that was going on with it and bring it back for us to digest it a little more and bring it back to you next year sometime. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I think we're ready to vote. Dr. Lorraine, would you like to call the vote?
Okay, I'll call the roll. Chan?
Chan, aye.
Chan, aye. Felsenfeld?
Felsenfeld, aye.
Felsenfeld, aye. Forge?
Forge, aye.
Forge, aye. Larin, aye. Mackenzie?
Yes.
Mackenzie, yes. Medina? Absent. Molina?
Molina, aye.
Molina, aye. Olage?
Olage, yes.
Olage, aye. Pacheco?
Pacheco, aye.
Pacheco, aye. Thakur? Thakur, aye. Thakur, aye. You absent. We have motion passed.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lorraine. We are now up to item 26, which is a discussion on the board approval of foreign dental schools. Let's see who is going to discuss that. I think Dr. Montez is going to present on that.
Good morning again. Tracy Montez. So agenda item 26, discussion of board approval on foreign dental schools, is an informational item that was included in today's meeting, partially to clarify some of the comments that were made during the February board meeting, as well as to address an upcoming discussion potentially on an assembly bill 1552, which will come up again in a later agenda item. So again, this is informational only. I'm going to read some of it and skip parts of it, but it is in your packet and summarizes the history of the approval process. So commencing on January 1st, 2003, Assembly Bill 1116, among other things, established requirements for licensure of applicants who are graduates of foreign dental schools, and required the Dental Board of California to be responsible for the board approval of foreign dental schools based on the prescribed standards and subject to new procedures regarding the board approval process. It added Section Business and Professions Code 1636.6, which provided the following legislative findings and declarations in order to assure that the people of California receive the highest quality of dental care. Dentists graduating from dental schools outside of the United States who apply for licensure in California must possess the same training and skills as applicants from schools that have been approved by the board. The current process for ensuring the adequacy of training of these applicants is deficient, that high numbers of foreign dental graduates are failing the restorative technique examination required in Section 1636, and that there are numerous repeat failures. While the current law requires that a foreign dental graduate who fails the restorative technique examination is required to take a minimum of 2 years of additional training from a dental school approved by the board, only 3 of the 5 dental schools operating in California offer a 2-year course of study for graduates of foreign dental schools. So based on those findings and declarations, the legislature urged all dental schools in this state to provide in their curriculum a 2-year course of study that may be utilized by graduates of foreign dental schools to attain the prerequisites for licensure. In 2019, the California State Legislature performed its sunset review of the board in response to the issues raised by the Legislative Oversight Committee's background paper. And during the March 5th, 2019 oversight hearing, the board submitted a response which included discussion regarding the committee's inquiry whether the process by which the board approved foreign dental schools should continue, how foreign dental schools were approved by the board, and whether accrediting organizations such as the Commission on Dental Accreditation should play a larger role in the approval process. The board responded in part as follows. And we go through and we have the response from the board. It goes into the board's November 2018 meeting, where they discovered a recently uncovered flyer advertising the Moldova School, and it has some information about that. To date, representatives of the Moldova School never did thoroughly respond to the board's questions. During the board's last sunset review, an issue was raised regarding the board should consider heavier reliance on accrediting organizations for foreign approvals if those options become available. And currently, the dental schools established within the United States but outside of California are approved by CODA, which further recognizes Canadian dental schools, and it goes on through that. So again, during the prior sunset review, the Oversight Committee discussed foreign dental approvals and whether the current process is sufficient and whether or not the dental board should have heavier reliance, for example, on CODA for approval of foreign dental schools. So it goes on, and then it is important to point out that over the last 20 years since the statute was created, there have been only 3 foreign dental schools that ended up applying for board approval. 2 have been successful, and that continued on. It brings us up to our current time, where we have had expressed interest in revisiting this topic. We have an assembly bill that we're going to talk about before, or talk about a little bit later. But again, as you go through this, it goes on through the time frame of the approval process, various things that have come up. I'm going to go into the discussion right now to kind of summarize things, and that is that Business and Professions Code authorizes the dentist license applicants to qualify for license by, among other things, furnishing satisfactory evidence of having graduated from a dental college approved by the board or CODA. Business and Professions Code 1636.4 until January 1st, 2020 require the board to receive applications for schools seeking approval as a foreign dental school and establish new application criteria. And it goes on citing the codes and the approval process. We have the 2 foreign dental schools that are currently approved. At the board's February 9th, 10th, 2023 meeting, the board was advised during public comment on items not on the agenda that CODA approval of a foreign dental school will take 10 to 12 years, making the January 1st, 2024 deadline impossible to meet. The public requested the board reassess the implications and repercussions of requiring foreign dental schools to obtain CODA approval. So although foreign dental schools appear to be reconsidering their request to the California legislature, the deadline by which must receive CODA approval, the board's difficulties in continuing the foreign dental school approval remain. Notably, and this is what's very important to clarify, the board does not have the resources or expertise to sufficiently evaluate foreign dental schools. This was something that became apparent when the initial review process was being undertaken. California is the only state in the United States that approves international dental schools. Other states require applicants for licensure to have graduated from either a program approved by CODA or to have completed a 2-year advanced standing program at a CODA-accredited school. There are existing pathways by which internationally trained dentists can become licensed in California. California offers licensure by credential to dentists who hold an unrestricted license in another state and who have practiced for 5 years. International students are also eligible for licensure if they complete a 2-year advanced standing program at a CODA-accredited school. The Medical Board of California no longer approves international medical schools and instead requires international schools to be accredited by other institutions that are listed here. Other Department of Consumer Affairs healing arts programs do not approve training programs, but instead recognize accreditation of educational programs by national organizations. The complexity of the accreditation process requires the use of national accrediting agencies with specialized knowledge and resource. The CODA site evaluation team, for example, is comprised of experts such as a scientist, curriculum expert, clinical science expert, and financial expert. CODA offers accreditation to international dental students that is recognized by all states. In August 2019, CODA approved a dental education program in Saudi Arabia. CODA is the sole entity recognized by the U.S. Department of Education to accredit U.S. dental schools. There is no documented evidence that increasing the number of internationally trained dentists will provide increased access to care in rural or underserved areas, which is also tends to be cited as a concern or support for this process. Travel outside the country for a site visit of foreign dental schools requires governor's approval currently. And then also, currently dental schools established within the United States but outside California are approved by CODA, which further recognizes Canadian dental schools approved by CODA of Canada. And again, this continues on, but we want to make sure that since the board's February meeting, AB 1552 was gutted and amended on March 23rd to revise the foreign dental school statutes, and would require the board to once again be responsible of foreign dental schools. This has since been changed, and Mr. Bruggeman will give an update on this when we get to our legislative review item. But again, this is an informational item. I know I jumped around in the meeting memo, but I wanted to give you some history, background of this, and then let you know that the goal was to clarify that this was something asked of the board by the legislature. The board responded to it. The legislator had some concerns and then removed this approval process and initiated the new requirements that relieves the board of the approval process of foreign dental schools, which appears to be a very valid decision given the points that I did speak to and are listed in the board memo. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Montez. I think we're ready for additional board comments, if there are any. There's no action on the item, so if not, is there any public comment on this? I'm sorry. You have to kind of raise up so I see you. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Dr. Molina.
Yes, I would like to thank,
Microphone close to you, please.
I would like to thank the staff for giving us a summary about the foreign schools. And looking at the summary, I just, having been to both schools, I would like to just clarify a few things. If you notice that when the board was processing the accreditation, it only took 2 years versus La Salle having been trying to get approval from CODA for 6 years and not being able to do so. And some of the objections that they had mentioned about the flyer that was being distributed, the flyer said that the school was in Europe, which is a true statement. Also, that they did not require a 4-year college education, which in most countries, except for the United States, it is not required. That the tuition was so much higher for our students, and in fact it's $20,000, and most schools like UCLA will have a out-of-state tuition. And that the local schools, dental schools, now have a foreign trained 2-year program, but only a few students are accepted in these programs. And the schools, when they have the evaluation, they pay for the evaluators to go in all the expenses. And in any objections or thoughts that I have conflict of interest, I want to make sure that one, we get legal as to whether I do or not, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm doing this because I believe that our community is not really being served, and there's not enough dentists. And as CDA has recently published, a lot of dentists are retiring because of the baby boomer generation. And the students that are graduating with an enormous debt of average $500,000, and they cannot afford to go to these communities and be able to pay their debt. So a lot of organizations like Altamed really benefits from having these students coming back and serving our communities. And so I am doing this because I care about the community, and you can look at my background as to all of the activities and all the services in volunteer work that I've done for the community, and that is my reason for the interest in supporting that these schools continue to be accredited. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Molina. Is there any additional board comment on this topic? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this topic? There's no action on this at this point, as I understand it, so. Good morning, Dr. Turley.
Ariane Turley, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I know this, so I guess what I would like to share with you is that this is a 21-year conversation for me. I served on the dental board. I certified the school in Mexico. To all of Dr. Montez's comments, she's absolutely correct. The process of accrediting schools is very difficult. So, and very timely and very costly, and you have to keep up with all the regulations and everything that happens yearly. So give you a brief history. When we went down to Mexico originally, the issue was CODA was not fully prepared to credit foreign schools. They were in the process of it. We did not wait for CODA accreditation. We moved forward as the state dental board to approve, to basically start the approval process. It has always been the intention that when CODA was able to certify, that this process would be turned over to CODA. This is not new. And basically, the other issue is that, with all due respect, Dr. Molina, it doesn't take 11 years to get CODA accreditation. Just like we have 2 dental schools in California, new schools in California, it'll take about 2 years. De La Salle started the accreditation, they got their results back, they found deficiencies, and they did not appeal the deficiencies or correct them because they had a change of administration of the president of the university who didn't want to move forward with it. Currently, the new president is very much in favor of getting CODA accreditation. They are moving on it. I spoke with the dean yesterday. The issue that with De La Salle is they actually want international accreditation of their medical school and their dental school. So the university has a big commitment. They have restarted the process. Had they continued the process, there isn't a reason to think that they would have been denied, just as Saudi Arabia was approved, but they didn't finish the process. So in fairness, that's really what's happening. And so I understand your position. And, you know, I'm a dental director for a federally qualified health center. Not everybody's going to serve the community. That we speak Spanish and can work with Spanish-speaking patients, yes, that's a service, but it's not necessarily true that public health is being served.
Thank you, Dr. Turley. Very good. Is there any other additional public comment on this topic? Dr. Loren, would you like to speak again?
No, I agree with what Dr. Turley, what she mentioned, and everything is correct. The only issue I have is what we have right now is that the school, anybody who graduates after 2024 and 2024 after that is no longer acceptable, right? Or have things changed in that regard? But to me, that's just too short still. I mean, if we could give them a couple extra years, that's the only thing I would request if we could. The rest with CODA, I agree with the CODA accreditation, and the board is not ready for that, but I really would like to extend that.
Okay, that's been heard. Thank you. I think we're ready, public comment no more, and I think we're ready to move on to the next item, which is item 27, discussion and possible action on legislative proposals to amend Business and Professions Code, Section 1634.1, regarding licensure by residency requirements. Ms. Regali, good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Felsenfeld and members of the board. And I don't know if I'm able to, but am I allowed to answer Dr. Lorene's question on the...
You're certainly able to do it. It's a non-action item. There's nothing we're going to do with it today. You can do that maybe offline.
Okay, no problem. So my name is Paige Regali. I am the Chief of Dental Programs and Customer Support, and today I will be presenting Agenda Item 27A, which begins on page 137 of your meeting materials. Licensure by residency, also known as LBR, is one of 5 pathways to dental licensure in California. The LBR pathway is unique in that the applicant may qualify for licensure by completing a clinically based advanced education and general dentistry program, or a general practice residency that is accredited by the American Dental Association Commission on Dental Accreditation, otherwise known as CODA. Similar to the licensure by credential pathway, LBR also requires the applicant to provide proof that the applicant has not failed the examination for licensure within 5 years prior to the date of the residence application, which is in Business and Professions Code 1634.1F. And board staff interpret examination for licensure to mean the REB and the ADEX examination. Board staff propose amendments to BPC 1634.1F to clarify this examination eligibility requirement, similar to the February board meeting when the board approved amendments to the licensure by credential statute, which clarified the similar requirement for the LBC pathway, and the proposed amendments to BPC 1634.1 would conform to this requirement. The proposed amendments today are as follows: that we clarify if an applicant has subsequently passed an examination for licensure, the prior failure should not make the applicant ineligible, and clarify state, regional, or national examination within the statute. Board staff also propose one technical amendment to strike residence to make the language in 1634.1F consistent with the use of applicant in other statutes. So the action requested today is that board staff is asking the board to consider the legislative proposal described in Agenda Item 27A. If the board approves of the legislative proposal, the board is asked to include a recommendation in the board's next sunset review report to amend Business and Professions Code 1634.1 to clarify the licensure by residency application requirements. And I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Is there any board member discussion on this topic? Seeing none, we're going to need a motion so that we can continue and have some action. Is there someone would like to make a motion? And there were 2 pieces to that. One is some technical corrections, and one is to allow them, if they fail it, it's going to be okay if they pass it. Am I getting that in the Cliff Notes version?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so as long as, similar to the LBC, there's a requirement in the statute that states that they cannot have failed a licensure exam within the past 5 years. And so the way that it's been interpreted is that if there's a failure, they failed. So moving forward, we'd want to make conforming changes with the LBC pathway, that if they have failed but subsequently passed, then the failure is not considered.
Okay. Let me, who would like to make a motion that we do these things? And if we can craft the motion if we don't have language in the, Steve, do you have some? You could put them together. One's a technical, applicant to resident, I think that's a technical thing. We can put that in there if you like. Would you like to do that? So state, we have to write the motion down, so state it. Yes, ma'am.
My apologies. So it should only be one motion. So the motion is just to make the amendments, which include the technical and the other language amendments.
That's even better. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Microphone.
Yeah, so there's actually a motion that was drafted on page 139 of the meeting materials.
There you have it. I missed that.
The motion is to move that this next sunset report recommend that we amend Business and Professions Code Section 1634.1 to clarify the licensure by residency requirements.
And there it is. Thank you, Dr. Forge. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? I think this is very important. I think it's very important to do this. Again, allowing people to come in and practice, and a 5-year waiting period is a long time. All right, so that's my discussion. If there's no further discussion on this, is there public discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I think we're ready to vote. Dr. Lorin, would you be kind enough to call the vote?
Chan?
Chan, aye.
Chan, aye. Felsenfeld?
Felsenfeld, aye.
Felsenfeld, aye. Forge?
Forge, aye.
Forge, aye. Larin, aye. McKenzie?
McKenzie, yes.
McKenzie, yes. Medina? Absent. Molina?
Molina, yes.
Molina,
Medina, yes. Olage?
Olagi, yes.
Olage, yes. Pacheco?
Checo, aye.
Pacheco, aye. Thakur?
Thakur, aye.
Thakur, aye. And Hughes, absent. Motion passes.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Ms. Regali.
Thank you.
It is 9:12. In 15 minutes, it's going to be 9-something, 27. So let's come back in let's take about a 15-minute break because we're going to have a big series of things that Mr. Bruggeman is going to deal with us. So let's come back about 9:35, okay? 9:35. Okay, it looks like we're back in session. All of our board members are back, and we're good to go. All right, we now move on to agenda item 27B, discussion and possible action on a legislative proposal to amend BPC section 1601.1 and 1740 and repeal BPC section 1742 regarding the Dental Assisting Council. I'm going to ask David Bruggeman, who is our regulatory and legislative and regulatory specialist, to present this agenda item. Good morning again, Mr. Bruggeman.
Good morning, President Felsenfeld. Good morning, board members and members of the public. I'm David Bruggeman, the legislative and regulatory specialist for the board.
Microphone on, please. It doesn't look
Microphone
like
is on.
All right, thank you.
I will project. The specific proposal can be found on pages 146 through 148 of your meeting materials. As indicated earlier today during the report from the Dental Assisting Council Chair, this proposal had been brought before the Dental Assisting Council at their meeting yesterday. I'm going to briefly describe the proposal that we are presenting before discussing the Dental Assisting Council's recommendation. And the specifics of this proposal are, in short, to change the structure of the Dental Assisting Council from a standing unit of the board as outlined primarily in section 1742 of the Business and Professions Code and also addressed in section 1740 of the Business and Professions Code, and to adjust the membership of the dental board, which is covered in section 1601.1 of the Business and Professions Code. And the staff proposal would adjust the number of dental members from 8 to 7 and adjust the number of dental assisting members from 1 to 2. Now, the intent behind the change in the structure of the Dental Assisting Council from this standing unit of the board to what could be a committee of the board, which the board already has authority to establish, would be to allow for additional flexibility in terms of how the council, the dental assisting issues can be communicated with members of the council, and if a committee is only of a 2-member status, that it does not need to comply with the Bagley-Keene open meeting requirements, which would insist on notice and posting of agenda and meeting materials with sufficient advance notice before the meetings of those committees. And again, the specific text of what's being proposed is on pages 146 through 148. As I indicated, and as was discussed during the Dental Assisting Council report, we presented this proposal to the Dental Assisting Council, and they opted to recommend to the board an alternative. And in their proposal, they would not wish to repeal their status as a unit of the board, so they would not want us to make the changes to section 1740 and not want us to repeal section 1742. And they would actually propose to revise the membership of the council in a different way, to effectively add 2 new members, and those 2 new members would be RDAs. So there would be 3 total registered dental assistant members of the board, and the qualifications of the additional members would be that one would be an RDA educator from a board-approved school, and that the other would be an RDA EF. And in each of those instances, those individuals would have at least 5 years of experience as a licensee. So that's the status of the proposal and the recommendation from the Dental Assisting Council. We've already heard a lot of discussion earlier today about some of the issues associated with the proposal, and I would simply then open it up to the board for additional discussion and questions.
Okay. This might get a little complicated. There's going to be some math, there's going to be some movements. I think what I would like to do, and I have the right as chair to do this, these are two separate issues. One is going to be the elimination or non-elimination of the DAC, and two is going to be restructuring the board. And they can be independent of each other. So I think what I would like to do, for the sake of clarity, is have us consider first the potential for elimination of the DAC or not, and then after that, looking at if the DAC stays, maybe the board doesn't have to be reconstructed. If the DAC goes, then maybe we should move to change the board. I think that will stand by itself. If there's no objection to that, let's do that. So would you go back and just give us a quick summary of which section we're going to eliminate or not, and that would be what we'll be discussing first.
If you want to focus specifically on the status of the DAC, that would be the amendments to Section 1740 and the repeal of Section 1742. The amendments to Section 1601.1 or whatever other changes that the board wishes to make would be specific to the membership of the board.
Okay. 1740, and again, for summary for people who have small minds at this point, what does 1740 say and what does 1742 say? Because we're going to be discussing them, and let's get a clear understanding.
The major statute with respect to the Dental Assisting Council is Section 1742, which creates the council, stipulates its membership, describes the qualifications thereof, and its interaction with the council, among other things. Section 1742 is a section which states the intent of the legislature, and part of that language, and I'm quoting specifically the language that would be struck in the proposal, the legislature further intends that the Dental Board of California, in implementing this article, referring to the dental assisting article in general, give specific consideration to the recommendations of the Dental Assisting Council established pursuant to Section 1742. If 1742 were to be eliminated, this language would also need to be eliminated.
Okay. So the discussion point is the elimination of the DAC. I think that's the first thing we want to talk about if we're all in agreement on that. So why don't we discuss that, and then we could look at the different statutes that we have to deal with when that happens, if it happens, okay? So why don't we start with that? Is there any board discussion on the elimination of the DAC? Microphone, where's your microphone? Dr. Chan. All right. All right. Go ahead, Ms. Forge. Dr. Forge, sorry.
I have a question. What is the, I guess, the benefit or non-benefit if we eliminate the DAC in general? I guess that's kind of where I start as a new board member. I kind of want to know.
Okay, that's a good question. I think Dr. Montez can speak to that a little bit.
So the concerns that were raised had to do with the fact that it is very time-consuming with regard to staff resources and cost to develop and run a council, even though they're done on the same days. We have to, public notice and go through all the process. And so in an attempt to streamline dental assisting issues, the thought was to make them a standing committee so that they could do different kinds of assignments and work offline, bringing them to the board meeting for discussion. Because most of the time, especially prior to my tenure, items would be discussed at the DAC meeting, and then they'd be held over so that we could do further research, develop agenda items, and then bring them to the board meeting. So there was always this delay, which can be fine, but again, we know that there's a lot of dental assisting items that need to be addressed, and so I was trying to strategize a way to have work done. Not, and I want to be clear, not to discourage transparency, because again, everything that would be done behind the scenes would still be brought to a board meeting, but we would have these discussions together rather than come in for the DAC, all the stakeholders come in, we have this conversation, recommendations go to the board, we get bits and pieces, sometimes it's not all communicated, then we're gone for a while, we come back with an agenda item, and there just seems to be not very consistent, a good flow of communication and action. So I was trying to, again, think of ways to streamline and be more efficient.
Ms. Welch?
To build on that, part of the responsibilities of a potential two-member RDA working group or committee of the board would be two board members working together on RDA issues, but then with the ability to engage stakeholders directly and potentially in a more robust process, because the two members could set up meetings with stakeholders and hear their issues and work on regulations or legislation, and then bring those concepts and worked through ideas and proposals to the board for a broader discussion through the public process. So it's really intended to increase stakeholder engagement behind the scenes while working on issues between meetings, and then bringing it to the public and all of the board members for discussion on a more vetted proposal.
Is there any other board member discussion?
So
Selby.
I just want to add, this is my experience with the DAC. So over the 5 years, recruiting individuals to the DAC has been extremely challenging, where even the DAC has not established quorum. And therefore, I 100% agree with Dr. Montez. I mean, delay is maybe not the right language to, or beg to differ on the pendulum of where you want to define delay, but I have seen it create a bottleneck for movement of where we all want to move forward. So it's just something to keep in mind. And now being one of the committee members that was involved in the recruitment process for DAC members, I am very proud of the DAC, that we are fully there, engaged. But it took quite a bit to get there. And then what does it look going forward 5 and 10 years from now, too, as well? Is that going to be sustainable?
Is there any other board member comment on this? Dr. Molina?
Yes, so I was part of the COMDA committee quite a few years ago. And, it was sad when it was disbanded, so I was happy to see that they had, restructured it. And coming to the meetings in the morning and then coming to our meetings, I can see the value of, having the dental assisting council meeting and talking about the issues that pertain to dental assisting specifically. I understand what Tracy's saying about all the red tape in the work that the staff has to do. So it's gonna have to be some kind of walking that fine line as to how do we have them express their concerns and their issues, and then work with our staff, making sure that they're not overburdened and they're able to do their work.
And for clarity, you're speaking to the maintenance of the DAC or for the elimination?
So I'm saying that I can see why that the DAC is important to have it, but I also understand that Tracy and the staff are concerned about the amount of work that they have to do both.
Okay. Dr. Montez?
So I want to clarify too, and I know I'm emphasizing that it can be a burden to the staff to put the meeting together and the materials, but I want to emphasize what Tara said, that it's not just the burden, but it is the fact that we need the DAC, if we continue to have it, is to be very active and to continue to do work to the extent that they can outside of those meetings and not rely on board staff to do the work, which is why, in my opinion, the standing committee is better, as Tara elaborated on, because they can go out and work with the stakeholders without having to do the formality that has to be done with the DAC. Again, not avoiding transparency, but trying to expedite the work and keep things moving. So regardless of, how the board decides, we'll do what we're charged to do. I'm just trying to be creative.
Okay, Dr. Ledrin?
Yes, I'm in favor of eliminating the DAC because I have been to meetings with DAC. I attend most of the meetings, and I've seen where they work for almost an hour and a half on topics. And when it is brought to the board, the board rejects it immediately, like in 5 minutes or so. The entire hour and a half of conversation is rejected. So I think it's much better that we work together.
Olagi, second.
That wasn't a motion at this point.
Motion? I can motion that.
However, you could say amen.
Oh, amen, sorry.
I do make a motion. I would make a motion for that.
I swear, I
So-
thought I
so-
heard that.
Hang on for just a second. We'll get a motion in a minute, Dr. Ledrin, and you're welcome to make it if you would like to. And I think we know where you sit or stand. Okay, is there any, let's just make sure we have a reasonably robust discussion at this level. This is a fairly important kind of a concept, and we don't want to give it short shrift, as it were. So is there any other board discussion on this matter? All right.
Dr. Felsenfeld, I just want to, commend Dr. Montez. It's being innovative. Right now in dentistry, we're innovative as a whole, as a profession. And I see Dr. Montez's mindsets in the conversation and working with others too. Can this lead to be a more personalized approach with stakeholders? And I think that will also set a different tone going forward of the impact we can make in the profession of dental assistants.
You're talking about the two people in a small
Correct.
committee that I could
Yes.
commit.
So like the
Okay.
pros of
I'm gonna move over here for a second and suggest that I don't really care what Dr. Montez says. What's gonna be best for the board, and what's gonna be best for dentistry in California, and what's gonna be best for getting done what we have to get done. That's really what it comes down to. I was just kidding about not caring. Okay. All right. Let's get back. Is there any other board discussion on this? All right. Now, Dr. Lorin, if you would like to make a motion, and we can have Dr. Loggy or Ms. Loggy. I can help you with it if you need it, but.
Sure, yeah, please help me.
Help you?
Yeah,
All right,
elimination of the
All right,
DAC.
so staff, and let's do this very slowly, because make sure everyone's clear. Staff is recommending that we amend section 1740, and if you're looking at the proposed language, by eliminating that last line, if I'm correct, Mr. Bruggeman, and eliminating.
Pardon,
Wait.
yes, in the
Yeah,
proposed language,
no.
it's the last sentence of 1740.
That's
which
correct.
is being
And all of
struck.
1742.
Correct.
And that's option number one in your discussion point. Let's go back.
Not precisely,
Not exactly,
because
but-
that does include language with respect to the makeup of the board.
All right, let's do this. We're going to separate this. So
So-
your motion, Dr. Larian,
Okay,
is to
amend business
to
and professional
amend
code.
by the elimination of the last line in 1740 and by all of 1742. Mr. Bruggeman, am I correct at that point?
That reflects the
That's
DAC-specific
the
language
DAC
in the
situation
proposal.
only.
Please repeat.
You're supposed to repeat, but I'll repeat it.
Amend
So the
business
motion made by
professional.
Lorin is
Okay.
that we, I'm putting words in her mouth, forgive me, but, no, this is very technically sensitive. We've got to be careful not to mess it up here, okay? So the motion by Lorin is now I've lost the section. Yes, well, you can help, but I think I can do it. How about I do it and you correct me? Would that be okay? We work well together. All right, what do you say? Oh, page 144, I went, on here. Yeah, I've got his things here. She's helping here, don't worry about it, Dr. Down?
You're going to do these.
Yeah, this is fine.
It's right here.
Yeah, that's fine. That's what I was doing. All right, I've got this. All right, so your language, Dr. Lorin, is that you would like to propose that we amend BP&C Section 1740 to remove reference to the Dental Assisting Council and to repeal Section 17, BPC Section 1742, which establishes the council in its entirety. That's sort of what I said. Okay.
I would just include,
Now, wait. Ms. Welch?
I would just include, including this legislative recommendation in the board sunset review report.
And yes, because that's when it will happen, actually, to include this legislative recommendation in that. So 3 pieces. Last line of 1740, all of 1742, and this should go into that. That was your, those are the words you used, is that correct?
Yes, those are the words I used. Thank you.
Is there a second, Dr. Alagi? Ms. Alagi? Yes. Dr. Alagi soon. Okay, very good. We have a second. All right. Is there any more board discussion at this point? Seeing none, let's open this up for public discussion. I suspect we're going to have some, so let's go ahead and do that. Good morning again, Ms. Becker.
Good morning. As you heard in my previous testimony, the reasons that we, representing the Alliance, you heard previously, and I apologize that I gave my testimony a little bit out of order.
That's fine.
However, based on that testimony, I would like to add that the Alliance emphatically opposes the elimination of the DAC for representation of all dental assisting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Becker. We appreciate that. And yes, you were, but it was okay, though. How about our sole dental assistant, Ms. Cruz? You go first. We've heard enough from Dr. Witcher for a moment, and he'll be back.
To add to the innovation and recruiting areas, to improve those recommendations, I'd like to add that there are educational institutions that are not familiar with.
I think that may be a little out of place right now. All we're asking is, do we want to keep the DAC, the Dental Assisting Council,
Absolutely.
or not? Well, okay, then you can say you're in favor of keeping
In
it. That's
favor
for,
of keeping it.
specifics might come in the next section, okay? Or later on, excuse me. Dr. Witcher, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but she was a new visitor, and you're an old visitor.
Did I not give her the opportunity?
And a gentleman, sir, go.
Dr. Bruce Witcher, representing CDA, and formerly board liaison to the DAC for about a decade. When the legislature put the DAC together, they got a lot of things right. And this is not meant to detract from Dr. Montez's comments at all. I know that the board and its staff and Dr. Montez has put tremendous thought into this, and this is just not a cavalier suggestion. But just by way of background, since I was there when the DAC was put together, the goal they sought was to include a diverse profession, representation from a diverse profession, including practicing RDAs, of which there are 3, EFs, of which there are 2, and educators that are 2. The reason they did this is there was a tendency for the educators and to some extent the EFs to dominate the discussion because they were often the most articulate and the loudest voices in the room. So we don't want to forget, our goals are diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and that's the thing that we want to see on the DAC. So that would be my thoughts against eliminating. I recognize the need for efficiency, and I think there may be other ways to achieve this through the use of electronic meetings, which we are now much more accustomed to. And having served on the DAC, we did have a number of 2-person subcommittees, of which I was a member, and I support that. That was a very efficient way of doing things. The other thing that you may remember is we had a series of dental assisting rulemaking packages that were addressed through workshops. Now, that took a lot of staff work, I will give you that, but I'm suggesting that that really helped inform stakeholders of what was on the table in terms of regulatory proposals. I spent several years going to those meetings, and I think, although there was always difficulty achieving a consensus, up to the last minute, we usually were able to do that. So I would say that's an effective tool, but you will have to obviously consider how to accomplish that. So I think the goal of government is not always to be efficient, although that certainly is a laudable goal. It is to be fair and to have adequate representation. So that'll close my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Under 2 minutes. Very good, Dr. Witcher. Next public comment, Ms. Glardy.
Hello, my name is Dr. Lori Gallardi.
Sorry.
Representing
Okay,
the
Dr.
Foundation for Allied Dental Education, a nonprofit organization that advocates for standards of dental assisting education, quality assurance, and patient safety. We concur with all the previous speakers, and we understand that although the DAC may take a long time to come to a resolution on a topic, and then it comes to the board, and it's a 2-second conversation, please understand that the dental assisting community voices have been heard during that time, and that was kind of the whole point of it, to give them that opportunity to voice their concerns, voice their issues, and then bring it back to the board so you don't waste a lot of time at the board meeting going through those same issues that you may feel there are other matters more important to take up. So we encourage you to not get rid of the board, the DAC, and to support retaining the legislation as currently written. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Glory. Ms. Pohl.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Claudia Pohl, representing myself. It is very disheartening to sit here and have this conversation. So to have the DAC repealed is taking away the voice of those 30,000 licensed RDAs, RDAEFs, OAPs, DSAs, as well as the unlicensed dental assistant. And it's very difficult to replicate the experience. And I would concur with everything that's been said. And Dr. Witcher, I could just say, yes, that. So it's very difficult to replicate the diversity and the experience and the background that those 7 DAC members have, faculty, EFs, working clinically, being educators. It's very difficult to replicate that with a 2-person committee. So I would advocate, and I totally understand and love what's being brought to the dental assistants, but as you mentioned earlier, we've had a lot of projects that have been stalled and not gotten done. I would advocate and ask you to not repeal the DAC, but to keep it and add in those work groups, which we have done before, and give it a chance and see if that can't happen that way. And there are other ideas that we have at CDAA and the Alliance for addressing some of the objections and barriers that were raised in the proposal by the dental board, and we'd be happy to, here I'm not talking for myself, but anyway, I'm happy to continue the conversation.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pohl.
Please don't repeal the DAC.
Appreciate that. Is there any other public comment? Well, I think it's time for us to take a vote. Dr. Lorin, would you reread the resolution so everyone is clear on what they're voting for?
To amend BPC Section 1740 to remove reference to the Dental Assisting Council, repeal BPC Section 1742, which establishes the Dental Assisting Council, and include in the legislative recommendation into sunset review.
Thank you. Is there any additional board discussion on that? A yes vote means that you want to eliminate the DAC and put it into the legislative proposal for sunset review. A no vote means you want to keep the DAC. Do you understand that? Okay. I think we're ready to vote then. Dr. Lorin?
Chan?
Chan, aye.
Chan, aye. Felsenfeld?
Felsenfeld, aye.
Felsenfeld, aye. Forge?
Forge, aye.
Forge, aye. Larin, aye. McKenzie?
McKenzie, yes.
McKenzie, yes. Medina? Absent. Molina?
Molina, yes.
Molina, yes. Olage?
Olagi, yes.
Olage, yes. Pacheco?
Pacheco abstain.
Excuse me? Abstain? Pacheco abstain. Thakur?
Thakur, aye.
Thakur, aye. And you absent. Motion passes.
Thank you. This has been very difficult, and to the members of the assisting community, we understand what you've brought to us, and it's difficult, and we understand it. We have other issues we're trying to deal with. All right, that leaves us with the second part of what was brought up by the council, and that would be the alteration of the board. Would you refresh us again, Mr. Bergerman, on that, please?
The initial, in both cases, we're dealing with amendments to section 1601.1 of the Business and Professions Code. You can find that on page 146. The initial, the legislative proposal that's in your books would maintain the current total number of members, but would reduce the number of dentist members by 1 and increase the number of RDA members by 1. The Dental Assisting Council made a recommendation to actually expand the membership of the dental board by 2, maintaining the current level of dentist members, and to add 2 new RDA members with specifics about the qualifications for each of the RDA members.
Thank you. Okay, so the question is, are we going to add members or not add members, and what's the makeup going to be in the mix of that? There were a number of different permutations that were presented. Dr. Chan, would you like to go first?
Thank you. I'd like to offer maybe a substitution in concept. And the concept is to maintain the current statutory census of 15. And within the 15, 8 dentist members, with the 2 qualifiers, the public health one and the educational one. And then the 7 described as public members. And let's see, so I would advocate the composition of the described public members as 1 hygienist, 2 RDAs, and 4 public members. And the following reason is a couple of things. First of all, the key word in creating the dental board is describing in 1601 practicing dentist. So the practicing dentist is the primary deliverer in that system. It's also the primary responsibility of that system. The second thing is just the optics. By reducing the numbers of dentists, you have right now 8 dentists and 7 public members in there. So I looked up the healing arts boards that require the primary deliverer of that system. The medical board, 15 members, 8 physicians, 7 public members. Naturopathic medicine, 9 members, 5 neuropathic doctors and 2 MDs, 2 public members. Osteopathic medicine, 9 members, 5 physicians, 4 public members. Board of Pharmacy, 13 members, 7 pharmacists, and 6 public members. Chiropractic, 7 members, 5 chiropractors, and 2 public members. So there's a dominance of why that board exists and who is the primary responsibility for that delivery of that system. Again, it's optics. Remember, we're a Department of Consumer Affairs. It's optics also. I can give this to our staff so they can review that also.
And you're suggesting 8 dentists, 4 public members, 3 of whom are dental related, and 4 other public members who are not dental related.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wells, I think, wants to speak.
To clarify, a public member on a board is not a licensee of that board at all. So, and there's separate provisions and requirements and conflicts of interest sections under the Business and Professions Code specific to public members. So, I'm not sure whether or not the numbers take that into account, whether each board you mentioned has the main licensing group, like the dental board has dentists, but they potentially, those other boards may have other licensees of that board. And so for us, RDH, that's a licensee of a different board, but they are a licensee, not really technically a public member. And the RDAs are licensed by the dental board. So we would really have 8 licensed dentists, 3 dental auxiliary licensees, and 5 public members. That's yeah, he's looking at reducing to 4. Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify who a public member actually is in relation to the board's licensees.
Thank you. And the increase of the RDAs on that is to acknowledge some of the arguments for the organizational bottlenecks that we've had.
I think Dr. Montez would like to speak.
And again, in the discussions about the composition, having come from DCA proper, I just want to gently remind board members that although many of our boards have a majority of professional membership, there is a lot of scrutiny with regard to antitrust concerns. So that's why we have the balance of public members with professional members. And also, as Dr. Chan mentioned too, one of the suggestions here was to address the RDAs and the need, as we heard, with regard to educators and specialties. So that's, I think, is something that I would like the board to really think about, is an additional RDA member in one form or another.
Let's do a little math, Dr. Montez. Tell us, in what you're saying, how that would fall out. You'd have 4 public members, 8 dentists.
I think that considering adding a member would be important. I think it's important to keep the public members, and we heard that there's wide support for maintaining the number of dentists. So you could add another RDA.
Increasing the board position by 1.
Yes. Again, though, we run into some concerns about even composition for voting purposes, but then it doesn't move forward. Our counsel can elaborate more on that because she has more experience with that. But I think at least, adding an RDA sounds important with the educator or potentially background.
So
or
you're suggesting
RDA.
expanding the board by 1 position more, and that would be an RDA?
It's a suggestion. It's
No,
an
that's
option.
fine. No, that's fine, something to consider. Dr. Chan, I think, is okay with that. Counsel, do you want to talk about 16 people on the board? Does it really matter?
It can matter in case there's, not a majority of voting members. If that was the situation, you likely would continue to have discussion and then additional votes to come up with the appropriate action that the majority of the members agreed with. There are other boards that do have an even composition. So, it can make things difficult, but, as you're actually seeing, I think right now you do have an even composition because you're -3 dentist members. So, and on some level, you're able to continue to do the business of the board with an even composition.
I have a comment.
I'm sorry, Dr. Molina.
Yes, so at the meeting yesterday, there was mentioned of suggesting 2 more members, and that way representatives from the dental assistant people that are educators, extended functions, and registered dental assistants will be represented in our board. So that might take care of not having to have an even number for voting purposes, and having representation from the different specialties in dental assisting.
Let me comment on that just for a second. And I think counsel and I, we've had a discussion about this in the past, but I think her points today are cogent. It doesn't matter whether we're even or odd. If a resolution comes up and we have a tie, that resolution does not pass. You need a majority. It's pretty simple. And we're working it like that right now, and we're doing well with it. So I think to increase the number of board members is going a little bit contrary to the way boards are supposed to be. We don't really need larger boards. We need boards that are more functional, all right? That's something I've spent a little bit of my time working on. And if we have a recommendation such as what Dr. Chan, or corrected Dr. Chan, had mentioned, that will give us 2 RDAs, 1 hygienist, 4 public members, and 8 dentists. I think something like that. So it can be an even number. That is not that should not be a game changer here. That's my comments. Any other comments by the board? Okay, would you like to make an official motion that we can then get to public comment, or Dr. Montez?
I just want to clarify, because currently there's 5 public members, so are we
Oh,
looking
really?
at reducing?
Okay, yeah, that would make sense. We only have 2, but, okay. We have 2 public members now on the board, is that correct?
That would not increase the board. If we keep it
If we
to
take,
4,
make it to 4.
right, because it takes a statutory change.
That's correct.
That's correct, okay. So I'd like to propose that the, okay, this is for the, oh my goodness, I'm sorry.
We're looking at section 1601.1.
16011, yeah.
And this is for the, I'm sorry. Want to make a motion for the legislative proposal to amend 1601.
Point one? Is
Point
that correct,
one.
Mr. Bergman?
It is.
Point one, okay.
For the board composition to be 8 practicing dentists, 1 a educator, and 1 in a public health community setting, 2 RDAs, 1 hygienist, and 4 public members.
Okay, with your practicing dentists including 1, not, we
Right.
don't want to have 2 extras. So
Right,
8
right.
including 1 public health and 1
That's correct.
educator. Okay. Is that-
The statutory language, I believe, addresses that. If you look, it gives the numbers in one sentence, then describes the backgrounds of the
Okay,
dentist members.
so that's okay. What I'm saying is superfluous.
Which I believe is consistent with what
Okay.
Member Chan presented.
And all we're doing then is adding 1 RDA member to the board by his suggestions. Is that correct, Mr. Bergman?
That's my understanding.
We want to
yes.
clarify, though, I believe that it is an educator.
An
correct.
RDA educator?
1 RDA educator and 1 and that was discussed yesterday as well. All right. So we're looking at, Ms. Welch, sorry.
Well, to be clear, the recommendation coming out of the DAC was 1 RDA with 5 years of professional experience, 1 RDA educator from a board-approved RDA educational program, and 1 RDAEF with 5 years of professional experience. So if we're just increasing to 2 RDAs, do you want to specify 1 RDA with 5 years of professional experience and 1 RDA educator from a board-approved RDA educational program?
Yes.
Okay.
Still crafting the language. No, that's fine, that's fine. We're not there yet.
And so to be clear, what's really happening is increase the number of RDAs to 2 as specified, and decrease the number of public members from 5 to 4.
Yes.
Absolutely correct. Okay, is there a second on that? I didn't see the second on that. Ms. Alagi has done the second. So now we have a resolution before us, and we'll read it out again as we vote to be sure everyone's clear on that. Is there any board discussion, any further board discussion on the motion? Seeing none, is there public comment on the motion? Alagi. Okay. Ms. Becker.
Sherry Becker, representing the Alliance. I don't really know, I'm sorry, I'm showing a little bit of my ignorance right now, but we don't like the motion because we like the DAC's recommendation for 3 RDAs to come onto the board.
I don't think that's what we've just done. What we've done is, we've said we need 2 RDA, 1 an educator and 1 an RDA practicing RDA. We've added some of the modifications that the DAC put in on those 2 positions with the 5 years and so on. It's not that it's not going to be 3, it's 2.
So then on this motion, we would
What's that?
recommend the RDA be an RDAEF.
No, that was not in there. That's not in, that's what DAC had brought to us. That is not in the mix right now. You're disagreeing with it perhaps, and that's fine, but it's not in the mix right now. In the mix right now are 2 RDA positions. One is a 5-year practicing RDA, the other is a 5-year by working in an accredited or approved program educator, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
It's not ignorance, it's confusion, and I get it. All right.
So we vote on this motion, and then does anything else come back after this? This would be the final decision moving forward, I guess.
We're gonna probably put a paragraph in about putting this into the legislative thing for sunset review as well at the end. But if this is passing, this is what we're going to do. Yes, ma'am. let's have a,
I'm sorry, thank you.
Ms. Becker.
Yes.
Do you want to speak more to this? And am I cutting you off? Because if I am, I apologize. I didn't mean to do that. I thought you just said you had some confusion as to what we're doing, and the confusion was on the number. But if you want to speak more to it, you have every right. You have about 2 minutes to do it.
I would like to speak more on this.
Sure, please do.
So representing the Alliance, we were in support of the DAC recommendation coming from, and thank you for that, I appreciate it, coming from, I'm trying to think of parliamentarian rule too, coming from the DAC yesterday with the recommendation of 3 RDAs on the board with the addition of the existing RDA, an additional RDA-EF, and then the addition of an RDA educator, all with the stipulations and the qualifications as previously discussed. So with this new compromise, the tenor is that dental assisting still will be at a deficit in being represented on the board.
Okay.
I think I'm done. I don't
Okay.
know.
Thanks, Ms. Becker. I'm sorry I made that difficult for you. Is there any other public comment? Dr. Ghilardi.
Thank you.
Didn't know.
10 years. Dr. Lori Ghilardi representing FADE. I'd just like some clarification for the recommended RDA educator. Could it be an educator from an RDA or an RDA-EF approved program? Could you add that in there so that we're not limiting it only being an RDA educator, but it could be from an EF program?
Hang on 1 second, please. All right, so you're recommending that we either an RDA-EF or an RDA educator. Thank you. We'll bring that back before we finish our vote. Dr. Witcher.
Dr. Bruce Witcher, CDA. Just maybe keep in mind Dr. Montez's comments about removing one of the board public members. I don't think that's going to fly because of the question of oversight and balance on the board. I was around when that position was added. That is not going to go away easily. And I would like to remind everybody, this is a legislative proposal. It's going to go into a package. It has to go through public process. It has to go through approval. So certainly coming from the board, it carries a lot of weight, but it is not the final version. And I would submit also that if you're going to add an RDA position to the board, that was considered when the DAC was put together. And for the very reasons that we've heard, that there's concerns about representation from the various members of the dental assisting community, the DAC was substituted for that additional member, I think for all the right reasons. So not to bring this around, I mean, I know you probably want to, follow basically the staff recommendation to add an RDA member. But again, there will be further discussions about this. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, so respectfully for some of the comments that we've heard, and one of them relates to amending perhaps or adding in, and I forget what it was. It was EF2 versus EF only, or EF, or RDA EF, the educator. All right, so, and that's fine. Dr. McKenzie?
Yeah, so kind of given the balance here, we're trying to ensure this process works well, but we also have the voices. I am sensitive to the inclusion, and so I'm a little bit more inclined to think about adding members, keeping the public members and maybe adding 2 additional members, so you don't have the even issue. You could have 2 additional RDAs, including the broader educator and then an additional RDA, so that would help increase inclusion, but also keep discussions all together. So I think that could be a better potential option for balancing both sides.
Okay. Any other comments? Do we want to read, we're about to vote on the motion. Do we want to read it one more time, and can we make sure that the language is 100% correct for that differential on the educator?
Don't they have to agree to amend
Well, yeah, we should. And I'm the one usually saying that. All right, let's make an amendment. So right now, what is the amendment going to say? We can do that. And I usually do that, and you say I shouldn't have to do that. Okay, go ahead. We're fine.
I think it's pretty easy. We've read off that it's add an RDA and then specify the 2 RDA members. One is 5 years of licensed experience, and the other one is, and actually, we probably need to say faculty member of a board-approved RDA or RDAEF educational program. And then reduce the number of public members to 4.
Okay. Do we have that written somewhere?
To be from an approved RDA program, is that enough?
RDA or RDAEF
There you go.
educational program.
You can just add those words in. That's the amendment before you, RDA educator from a board-approved program or RDAEF program. That's the amendment. All right? Is there any discussion on the amendment on behalf of the board?
So point of clarification, we're still talking about maintaining the total of 15 on that board, correct?
That is correct at
And
this
it gives
point.
an option of the educator.
That
Is
is
that
correct
correct?
at this point.
Thank you.
What's that?
I'll accept the
Oh,
amendment.
he doesn't have to accept the amendment.
no.
He does not have, it's the board has to accept the amendment. Sorry. Anyway, the point is, that's an amendment to, and we have to agree to it. The board does, not just him. So, is there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we can vote on, yes, Dr. Molina. I'm sorry, I
Yes.
can't see you, so just scream out at me, please.
Yes, so I don't agree with this amendment. I think that reducing the number of public members is not a good idea.
No, we're talking about the amendment to make the educator come from either an EF school or a regular school. That's all. That's what this amendment is all about.
Okay,
So
so-
we can go later on for that. All right? So, are we ready to look at the amendment? Dr. Lirin, can you read the amendment to us one more time so we're all clear on what we're voting on?
Okay, the amendment is to amend 1601.1. The board shall consist of 8 practicing dentists, 1 registered dental hygienist, 2 registered dental assistants, and 4 public members of and the amendment also?
Well, the amendment is the 2 dental assistants
yeah.
have to have qualifications.
Do I add that?
The qualifications for the regular
the
one
two-
is 5
and-
years of practice.
2 dental
RDA, 5 years of
assistants,
practice.
5 years of practice, and 1 RDA is
Educator.
educator in a board qualified RDA or RDAEF educational program.
I think we've nailed it on that. That's the amendment, all right? If there's no further discussion, we can vote to amend it. So, Dr. Lirin,
The vote, I'll take the vote. Call
please
the
do.
vote.
This is just on amending it, not the final passage.
On the amendment? This is
Yes,
for the
that's all we're
amendment.
voting
Okay,
on.
Chen, aye. Felsenfeld,
Felsenfeld, aye.
Forge, aye. Ladine, aye. McKenzie,
No.
McKenzie, no. Medina, absent.
absent.
Molina,
Molina, yes.
Molina, yes. Olage,
Loggy, yes.
Olage, yes. Pacheco,
Pacheco, aye.
Pacheco, aye. Thakur, Thakur, aye. And Hughes absent. The motion passes. Wait, 1, 2, 3, okay.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
Is there any further board discussion? Seeing none, is there additional board comment, public comment to discuss this particular amendment, motion as it's amended, the entire motion as it's amended? I see none. We're ready to vote on that which you just read. Oh, wait, are you coming back up again? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think I'm coming back up. Hi.
You think you are?
Yeah.
Not
Hi,
feeling well today, I'm sorry.
Sherry Becker, the Alliance. So I just need some clarification. So what you're going to be voting on now is just 2 RDAs, not adding 3 RDAs. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's what the motion is,
Okay.
okay?
No, but yes.
Okay, no, but yes? We appreciate that.
I have
Dr.
clarification.
Montez.
In the order of these motions, because I apologize, I'm getting a little confused, where does the comment about maintaining the public membership fall into this? Because I heard 2 board members express some concerns about this, as well as the public. So is that off the table. I just want to be clear because it sounds like we're moving forward with a motion.
Within
An
the
amended motion.
within the resolution, I think we are at 4 public members, and thereby decreasing it, if I'm not mistaken. Dr. Chan?
So for clarification, on the, let's see, Neuropathic Medicine Board, 9 members, 5 are neuropathic physicians, 2 are MDs, only 2 public members. On the chiropractic board, 7 members, 5 chiropractors, 2 public members. So it's not inconsistent with that precedent.
Okay. Are we ready to vote? Looks like we are. Everyone okay? Let's go. Dr. Loren, if you'll call for the vote.
Chan? Chan, aye. Felsenfeld?
Felsenfeld, aye.
Felsenfeld, aye. Forge? Forge, aye. Ladine, aye. McKenzie?
Mackenzie, no.
McKenzie, no. Medina, absent. Molina?
Molina, yes.
Molina, yes. Olage?
Olagi, yes.
Olage, yes. Pacheco?
Pacheco, aye.
Pacheco, aye. Thakur? Thakur, aye. You absent, motion passes.
Thank you, Dr. Loren. Thank you, Mr. Bruggeman. Very difficult, very hard, a lot of work, a lot of good conversation. We'll see where that goes. This is gonna be back in the future. We're not done with this by any stretch of the imagination, but we've got a plan. All right, I think we're gonna move on to, let's see, 27C, I believe it is. And we're looking to discussion and possible action on legislative proposal to modify statutes related to general anesthesia and sedation permits. Mr. Bruggeman, once again.
Yes, thank you, President Felsenfeld and board members. This legislative proposal is a revision to previously approved legislative proposal by the board. The latest edition was at the February 2023 meeting. After that meeting, as you're aware, President Felsenfeld, you had offered some comments to the board and to board staff. In a discussion with staff and further review, we have identified additional items to make changes to the legislative language around SB 501 to provide additional clarity around a number of different issues. If you look at the legislative proposal text, and that text starts on page, forgive me, page 158. The specific changes that we are advancing at this time are highlighted. You will note that there is text in blue, which would be additions, text in red, strike through, which would be deletions, but only that text which is highlighted is under consideration as part of this proposal. All of the other changes that are outlined in the proposal have been approved by the board at previous meetings. So with that, I would just like to briefly summarize the changes before we get into discussion of the specifics of the proposal.
You're going to walk us through the entire piece of legislation right here?
My inclination is to basically go through each highlighted section and briefly describe what is going on. So if we look at section 1646, subsection C would provide a definition for good standing. And this definition is used throughout this proposal and other highlighted sections. The indication here is that we want to make sure that any permit applicants for permits have licenses or relevant permits depending on their situation in good standing. And this is meant to reduce the potential disciplinary complications resulting from a situation in which there is an applicant who had a problem with their license but still applied for a permit. We would not allow for individuals who do not have a license in good standing to apply for sedation and anesthesia permits under these proposed changes. And in 1646 by point 1, this is similar changes in subsection A to ensure that the active dentist license and active permit, basically that nothing has been expired and that their status remains in good standing. If we go to section 1646.2, this is on page 160. The first highlighted text again adds this language with respect to good standing. There's a clarifying change in subsection C2, which specifies to where the patient records referenced in the proposal are to be submitted. They are to be submitted to the board. If we look on page 161, this is 1646.3 subdivision A. This is a clarifying language indicating that relevant records are supposed to be maintained as required by board regulations. We're not specifying that to dentists holding permits, but as making it as a more general statement. Section 1646.9, again in subsection A1, we have language with respect to ensuring that we have active licenses. In subsection B, that the relevant license issued by the medical board or by the osteopathic medical board is in good standing. Continuing on to say page 162, section 1647.2. Again, we have similar language here clarifying that we're looking for individuals with active licenses in good standing. In subsection B and C, we are specifying the specific permit that we're referring to, moderate sedation permit holders, which are dentists but could be physicians depending on their circumstance and the relevant permit. Moving on to page 163, this is 1647.2 subdivision D. Again, we're specifying moderate sedation permit holders because they could be both dentists, could be dentists or could be physicians and surgeons, osteopathic or not. 1647.3, more changes with respect to good standing language in subsection A. In subsection D2, we are actually moving language. We have language there with respect to ensuring the privacy of patient records. We're moving that from subsection D2 to later in this same section. Specifically, I believe we're looking at sections H and I. I'm now on page 164. Again, we're still with 1647.3, now subdivision E. We're specifying, the previous language simply stated a permit holder. We're specifying that it's a moderate sedation permit holder with a pediatric endorsement. In subsection F, we're specifying that the permit holder also possesses a pediatric endorsement. In G, we're also, again, clarifying language about the specific permits that are being held and the relevant pediatric endorsement qualifications. Subsections H and I. H, again, refers to, it's where we move the language with respect to patient medical records, and subsection I concerns additional good standing language. On to page 165. Again, the change to 1647.6B. This is making the language, more broadly applicable and not simply to dentists holding permits. The statute would require that records of the physical evaluation, medical history, and moderate sedation procedures shall be maintained. And that's independent, that's an obligation regardless of whether we're talking about the dentist and the medical facility associated here. Moving on to section 1647.18, subdivision B, we're putting in good standing language in place in that subsection. In 1647.19, we're again looking at more clarification language with respect to the permits that are being issued for physicians and surgeons that may apply for anesthesia and sedation permits, and also specifying the particular permits that may be applicable in this section. Moving on to, further down in that section, we are actually going to be removing some language. We believe the clarifying changes in subsection A to 1647.19 basically would allow us to remove the subdivisions 1 and 2 in that same section. For 1647.20, this is now on page 166. More good standing language in the first paragraph. In 1647.22A, again, we're revising the language with regarding the maintenance of records to not specifically apply to the dentist holding the permit. On to page 167, we're looking at section 1647.30. This is, a lot of these changes are organizational, but the subsection B adds the good standing language that's being added throughout this particular proposal. In section 1647.31, we're doing clarification language about the qualifications for the dentists, for the individuals that hold the relevant permits or licenses that allow them to apply for anesthesia and sedation permits. Going on to page 168, section 1647.32. Again, clarification language about the relevant licenses or permits that would allow an individual to apply for sedation and anesthesia permits. The language in 1647.35, we're adding some clarification language with respect to what kind of permit holder we're referring to in that section. On to page 169, section 1647.36. Again, more language clarifying the intent behind the maintenance of anesthesia and sedation records. In what would now be section 1647.38, specifying which permit holder is being referred to in this section, both in the first sentence and in the last sentence. And that is my rapid summary of the specific changes being proposed with this iteration of the legislative proposal.
Lots of clarification, lots of organization, lots of bringing in the current terminology. Substantive changes in here?
Technically speaking, the definition of good standing in and of itself would be a substantive change. The idea here is to increase clarity of the legislative language, to increase consistency of the legislative language, to make sure that references that are valid for all permits are found within the language respective to each of those permits.
And in section 2079, the elimination of the physician, the medical anesthesiologist, we deal with that elsewhere in here. Is that correct?
So this specific repeal was handled in a previously approved legislative.
Okay, it's not blue. You're right.
Version
And we
of
did
this
take that out.
legislative proposal.
Okay. All right. There's a lot of information in here.
Absolutely. Any questions,
I'm sorry
I'm
I
happy
did that
to
to you.
entertain.
Is there any discussion by members of the board on this? Dr. Chan, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This is a lot. I understand the reason for, the rhetorical reasons for defining what good standing means. I understand that. And just for clarification, it's not for someone that's going through an unresolved complaint or going through the process yet in terms of what good standing means. And the intent behind it is justifiable. It's as a safeguard for someone continuing doing GA or sedation. Now, we also realize as policymakers, it has to be, what's left is the language that's on paper. And what's left for downstream to interpret what is on paper. What happens if there is an unrelated action on the good standing, for example, not related to sedation, not related to GA, but a fictitious name permit, and they got a reapproval? All that's left is the language that's on paper. It's not in good standing. They had a public approval. So there's another variation here that can be, needs to be worked out.
Any other board comment? Okay, we're going to need some kind of a motion. You have that in
I
your...
believe
Yeah.
board council has some
I'm sorry.
questions.
Ms. Welch,
I just have a potential response to the concerns raised.
please. There's a page.
All the definitions for good standing, they're aimed at a license or permit that is active and unrestricted most public approvals, I mean, if they contain a condition, like a term and condition, that's not really a restricted license. That's, hey, you did something bad, we're gonna make you do some CE, but there's no actual restriction on the license. It remains active and unrestricted, so a public approval being issued would not affect the ability to apply for a permit. And largely what this is, what's happening here is the existing language requires good standing to administer general anesthesia and sedation in multiple of the sections. We're saying, well, we're not looking at when you administer, we need to look at when you apply for a permit. Are you in good standing applying for the permit? Because if you're not, and you're the subject, you've got a license on probation, or, surrendered, or there's a pending disciplinary action, that would allow the board to hold up that application and not issue a permit pending this, the consideration of the discipline or the pending restriction of the dentist license. So that's the intent behind it, is to not allow permits to be issued while there's a pending action on the dentist license. Because we have seen that recently, and our hands have been a bit tied unless board staff or the AG's office is, continually checking the board's website to see if a permit was issued. And it's very difficult for staff to alert each other. We've got separate units. There's the licensing unit, and then there's enforcement and complaint. So this would allow the licensing unit to hold up an application for a permit when they can, pull up in the system, this person has got some pending discipline. So until that gets resolved, the permit couldn't be issued. Separately, if a permit already was issued, they could continue to administer. It's just changing the placement of that good standing to where it should properly go.
We good? Okay. If there's no other board comment, we're going to need a motion to do either option A, which would be accept all of the changes in the proposed text, or option B, not accept them, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Bruggeman.
Right, and
Okay.
again, this is specific to the highlighted text
Just
that
the
I
blue, just the blue.
rapid fire
Just the
summarized
blue.
earlier.
All right, so, does anybody want to read all of that, other than me? I seem to get the big reads. All right, I will do that. I would like to move, and Dr. Lareen, you can write it down, but you can also read this. You'll have to read that back at some point. I'd like to move to submit to the California State Legislature in the board's Sunset Review Report a recommendation to add section 1646.12 to Article 2.75 and sections 1647.35, 1647.36, and 1647.37 to Article 2.87. Amend sections 1646, 1646.1, 1646.2, 1646.3, and 1646.9 of Article 275, sections 1647.2, 1647.3, and 1647.6 of Article 2.84, and sections 1647.18, 1647.19, 1647.20, and 1647.22 of Article 2.86. Sections 1647.3, 1647.31, 1647.35, and 1647.36 of Article 2.87, and Section 1724 of Article 6 of Chapter 4, and repeal Section 2079 of Article 3 of Chapter 5 of Division 2 in the Business and Professions Code. Do I have a second? Thank you, Dr. Chan. You're welcome for not reading it. All right. Is there any further board discussion on this? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on this? Seeing none. Dr. Lorin, we're ready to vote. I think if it's okay, we don't have to reread
No.
that whole thing. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we don't want to go through, it's there, it's right in front of you, and I just read it beautifully, so let's move on. Take the
Okay, we'll
vote,
take the
take the
vote
vote.
now.
I got the numbers
Chan?
right.
Chan, I. Felsenfeld.
Felsenfeld, aye.
Forge. Forge, I. Larin, I. McKenzie.
McKenzie, yes.
McKenzie, yes. Medina, absent. Molina.
Molina, aye.
Molina, I. Olage.
Olagi, aye.
Olage, I.
See
Pacheco.
what my notes
Pacheco,
myself
aye.
was.
Pacheco, I. Thakur. Thakur, I. You absent. Motion passes.
We did, thank you very much. I think we've been doing some hard work. I think a break would be appropriate for about 15 minutes or so, so let's go about 5 after 10 or 11, 5 after 11 to come back, and Mr. Bruggeman's gonna have a little more reading to do. Okay?
I
Thank you
always
very
read
much.
here.
11:05. I'm gonna move on. If my, we're going to item number 28B, and that's going to be a discussion and possible, 28? Is there an A in here? Did I miss it?
There is.
Oh, it's up here, sorry. Status update on pending regulation. Mr. Bruggeman, you're up again, sir.
Thank you,
You always have the
President.
back end of the meeting and lots to talk about. Go for it.
Such is life. This is David Bruggeman, Legislative and Regulatory Specialist for the Board. I'm going to briefly provide a status update on the pending regulations. This is Agenda Item 28A. The packages that have seen action since the last board meeting are described on pages 172 and 173 of your meeting materials. The chart covering the other packages that have not moved since the last board meeting follow on page 174. Since the last board meeting, the package concerning the implementation of AB 107, which would establish temporary licensure for military spouses and domestic partners, that is currently with the Department of Consumer Affairs for review, and once their review is completed, we expect to be able to file that package with the Office of Administrative Law. Next is the update on the board's disciplinary guidelines. We approved that language at the February meeting, and we are working with Department of Finance and other staff to prepare that package for review by the Department of Consumer Affairs, and we would expect to move that package forward by the time we have another update at our August board meeting. And the last package is actually the new package, Agenda Item 28B. This is a package which would address revisions to the regulations about lost, destroyed, or mutilated licenses, as well as inactive licenses. And so I'm simply going to segue into that package at this time. This would affect the following sections of the California Code of Regulations, Title 16. Section 1012 concerns lost, destroyed, or mutilated licenses and the process that is required to seek replacement. Sections 1017.2 concerns the processes related to achieving inactive license status, and then again activating one's license status if they are on inactive status. And Section 1021 concerns the regulatory fees, concerns the license and permit fees, and changes to these regulations are going to require an update of our fee structure, and that's why Section 1021 is included in this package. And just to go over the lost, destroyed, and mutilated licenses first. Staff have recently been receiving complaints and inquiries from licensees and consumers about the requirements for requesting a replacement or duplicate wall certificate because of loss, theft, mutilation, or destruction, or a name change. And there's currently no form adopted by the board for processing these requests and for collecting the necessary information needed to accurately verify the identity of the applicant or the need for that substitute or replacement license, permit, or wall certificate. So we are proposing the adoption of a form and making changes to the associated regulations in Section 1012. You can see the proposed regulatory text on page 179, and the form specific to the replacement license certificate is found on page 183. It is also we're just focused on that form right now. So these, and I also have to state that there's been amended materials that are available online. They may not be in your briefing books. but we have had to, since the materials were posted, we needed to revise the workload analysis and the fee associated with those changes. So specifically, forgive me. So part of the changes being made here is the elimination of the fingerprinting requirement in order to obtain a replacement license. This requirement was in place regardless of whether the licensee already had fingerprints on file or not, and we felt, pardon? If she's available.
Mr.
Apologies,
Bergman?
we're trying to get regulatory counsel, Christy Shields online.
Mr. Bergman,
Apologies.
are you still on 28A?
I'm on 28B, I
Yeah, we've gone
apologize.
to B.
Okay, so,
May I?
yeah,
You went into B really quickly, and I had an aversion to it. I guess you pushed me right past it, and we didn't ask for public comment on that. No,
For rushing things.
no, that's fine. You're not rushing anything. I just missed it. My fault. Was there any board comment on 28A, the regulatory packages that are kind of working their way north? Seeing none, was there any public comment on 28A with the regulatory packages? I think we're good then, okay. And I apologize, I didn't want to talk about 28A, I went right to B, I guess. But let's move on
Understood.
that. Now, we're looking for Ms. Shields.
She's available, we just, should there be additional questions
All right.
that we need her expertise on, we can consult with her as needed. Hello, Christy, this is David, and you're live with the board. We're discussing the lost, destroyed, and mutilated licenses at this time.
Okay.
And so if there are questions, you'll be available to answer them as needed. Thank you for
Okay.
being online.
Thank you.
So we are adopting a new form, LIC 9, for the replacement licenses, and we are revising the text. We're renaming the section replacement licenses or permits. We are and indicating that it's a significant revision of the existing regulations. And the requirement would be that if they're seeking a substitute license or WAL certificate, that they're going to submit this completed application to the board, certifying that they lost, theft, mutilation, or destruction of the pocket license or WAL certificate, or a name change as applicable, and that they would need a new pocket license or WAL certificate in their name. And so the form, the LIC 9 form, would be what we would use for that purpose. And we're incorporating that form by reference into the regulations and setting a non-refundable fee for that certificate in section 1021. And that specific fee is $111. It is a significant increase, but these fees have not been updated in some time, and the workload analysis, given the staff time and materials involved, justifies that fee amount. As part of this same package, we are also, well, actually, I'll just stop there and see if there are any questions about the proposed changes to 1012 for the replacement licenses.
Are there any questions by members of the board on 28B, the replacement licenses? Seeing none. Oh, Dr. Liren?
The replacement wall plaque or both, the pocket and the?
They would use the same form if they needed a replacement pocket license or if they need a replacement WAL certificate. And that would be indicated on the form. The
So
fee would remain the same.
The pocket license is still the one that looks like a printout? The paper printout?
I must confess, I have never seen one.
No, because honestly, I've seen, the license that I've received as a dentist is just a piece of paper, and even I put it inside my, my plastic, and then the ink sticks to the top of the plastic. I mean, and we are charging 110 for a paper.
111 is the proposed fee. It's currently $50.
I mean, I've seen the contractors' pocket license, and they're strong plastic. I mean, they're really hard. There's no way you're gonna mutilate it or destroy it. I mean, unless you cut it with a scissor. But is there any way we can, if we're gonna up the fee, make this a little bit better pocket license? Because I mean, It's a little embarrassing when I show it to my friends, honestly. And I think we need something that's a little bit better quality.
We can certainly explore that, but I believe it's a department-generated vendor. Yeah, it's a contract that the department has, so we can certainly raise that to their attention.
Okay. Any other board discussion on this?
My question is that because of the quality of the license, or is it because of the manpower?
So the process, the bulk of the costs are for the staff time involved, and again, these fees have not been changed in almost 20 years, I believe, and so that reflects changes in the staff time required to confirm that the license, that this individual that is requesting a replacement has been issued a license, and that then we would proceed to issue the new license or certificate as the case requires.
Any other discussion by members of the board? This will be up for one large meeting,
Right.
so we're not going to
We're
go.
combining, the
let's
motion would be in combination.
Combine, yes,
with
this is
the
one piece of it.
Right.
And do we, Ms. Shields, do you have anything that you need to add to this, as long as you're with us?
Well, I just wanted to add that, as Mr. Bruggeman indicated, the fee hasn't been increased since 2006, and under current law, the department is the one that has the authority to enter into contracts for vendors, and so this board's sort of bound to that contract. Ms. Montez will be raising this issue, but currently we are sort of stuck with the fee that we have set here because of the contract that we are currently under.
Okay.
Right. If we could move on to the inactive license discussion.
If we're finished with that, let's go to the next section. There's 3 in here, as I recall. There's 4, actually. No, it's 3. Inactive licenses.
I think we're good. So as part of this package, we're requesting changes to the process for licensees that are seeking inactive status or similarly seeking to change their status back to active if they are currently in inactive license status. And so this process involves verifying the continuing education requirements that they need if they're seeking to reactivate their licensing status. And we are proposing the specific text. You can look on page 179 and 180 of the meeting materials. The form that we would be updating is found on page, it's found on page 185. The current form is on page 184, and that form would be repealed and replaced by the form that you can see on page 185. Those fees are already set, and we're not seeking any changes to that. We're the changes in this particular proposal would repeal the current application, replace it with the new application, and provide additional detail to applicants to make sure that they're aware of the requirements for to process their application for inactive or active status as appropriate. And the idea with these specific changes, we're going to eliminate the requirement that applicants provide evidence of their continuing education credits with the application. They would simply certify that they have complied with the necessary continuing education requirements, much as we are doing with renewal, and that in the instance, if they're selected for an audit, then they would be asked to provide evidence. And so this would provide consistency and eliminate what could reduce some workload for the staff that are responsible for continuing education compliance. And that summarizes the proposed changes with respect to the active and inactive license requirements. Are there any questions?
Any board
on
comments or
those
questions?
Proposed change.
Thank you. Comments,
regulations?
questions by members of the board? Seeing none, do you want to do the third and final part, or did you?
The,
you did sort of
it's
include it
simply,
in there.
the change to section 1021 reflects the change in the fee for the replacement license.
Okay, that's just the fee.
And that's
Okay.
the.
You already mentioned that.
Right, it's subdivision I. It's on the bottom of page 180.
Okay. So is there any board discussion on the third part, the change in the fee? We sort of had a shot at that earlier, but anything more on that? All right, seeing none, we're going to need a motion. And Mr. Bergerman has been kind enough in his report to put some options in there. Would anyone like to make the motion? I'm assuming, that's over here somewhere.
Page 177.
Well, motion A and motion B, right? Motion A is the one that would adopt the language and everything you put into this.
As
20 Bs
proposed,
as
yes.
proposed. So, would anyone like to do that? Dr. Thakora, you're looking at it, go for it. Read motion A. We have to read these into the record. I know it's tedious, but we have to do that.
So I move to approve the proposed regulatory text and incorporated forms for sections 1012, 1017.2, and 1021, and submit the text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review. And if no adverse comments are received, authorize the Executive Director to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, make any non-substantive changes to the text and the package, and set the matter for a hearing if requested. If after the 45-day public comment period, no adverse comments are received and no public hearing is requested, authorize the Executive Director to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking and adopt the proposed regulations, as noticed for 16 CCR sections 1012, 1017.2, and 1021.
Thank you. Do I have a second for that?
I second.
I think Pacheco was in there first, and Dr. Molina, you were third. Okay, we have a second and a motion. Is there any further board discussion on this topic, the three pieces of that? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the motion? I think not, so we can take the vote. Dr. Lebrin? Oh, did I miss something? It was actually Pacheco, at least she was sitting closer to me, and then Molina. Hold it for the next one. Okay. Would you don't have to read, you do not have to read that whole paragraph. That's in the record.
Thank you very
so
much. Appreciate
You're
that.
welcome. I used to have to do that. It was not good.
Chan? Chan, I. Felsenfeld?
Felsenfeld, aye.
Felsenfeld, I. Forge? Forge, I. Larin, I. McKenzie?
McKenzie, yes.
McKenzie, yes. Medina? Absent. Molina?
Molina, yes.
Molina, yes. Olagi?
Olagi, yes.
Olagi, yes. Pacheco?
Pacheco, aye.
Pacheco, aye. Thakur? You absent, motion passes.
Thank you very much. We're now going to move on to item not 29A, it's going to be something else, right? It's going to be, no, it is.
Yes, it is.
29A, I'm getting confused on my numbers here, and that's the tentative legislative calendar.
So the calendars can be found on, again, this is David Bergerman, Legislative and Regulatory Specialist for the Board. The calendars can be found starting on page 189. To the Senate and the Assembly essentially this year have the same calendar. The relevant deadlines for us today are April 28th, which I recognize was 3 weeks ago, but that was the last day for policy committees to hear and report to fiscal committees fiscal bills introduced in their House for this year, which means that any legislation introduced in the Assembly would have had to have passed their appropriate Assembly committee by that point in order to become law this year. And then the appropriations committees had to have heard those bills by today in order to move them forward in the legislative process for this year. I highlight those because some of the legislation that we have been tracking did not meet those deadlines and therefore would not be considered or would not have an option to become law this year, barring some exceptional circumstances. And I have to emphasize exceptional. So that's the extent of the report on the calendars. Just wanted to see if there's any board comment on this item.
Any board questions or comments on the calendar? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the calendar? No, sir. Please continue.
So that's the extent of item 29A. We move on to 29B. legislation of interest.
That's correct.
So the board has been tracking since the beginning of the legislative session over 30 pieces of legislation. Only 29 are, at the time of this memo was written, were still in some form of active status. Only 16 of them were agendized because those were the items we felt might conceivably have board impact and maybe of interest for the board to discuss and perhaps take an action on. We've identified 5 bills which we really think the board should consider and perhaps take a position on. Before we discuss those 5 specific bills, which I'll identify now, that's AB 481 concerning dental assisting. That's AB 936 considering the dental students who are approved to participate in sponsored healthcare events. That's AB 1552 regarding foreign dental schools. That's SB 372, which refers to the processes for the Department of Consumer Affairs to address requests for records on licensees and registrants with gender and or name changes. And finally, SB 544, which would address certain aspects of the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act concerning teleconferencing. Those are the 5 bills that we think the board may wish to discuss and possibly take action on. But of course, they have the option to do so for any of the bills that have been placed on the agenda. I'm going to briefly cover those 11 bills right now. The first is actually a resolution. This is a resolution that was approved back in March to designate February as Children's Dental Health Month. AB 795 was a bill that would have changed the threshold for which the unlawful sale of equipment, supplies, or services in knowing violation of licensing regulations would constitute crime. That bill did not meet the April 28th deadline for further consideration this year. AB 883 is a bill that would extend the provisions allowing expedited processing for the recently retired members of the military to include those participants in the Department of Defense's Skill Bridge program. AB 996 would require the Department of Consumer Affairs to have a conflict of interest policy in place with respect to continuing education providers. AB 1028 would make changes to the current laws regarding who mandated reporters for crimes involving abuse and or violence. AB 1257 is a sunset bill for the Dental Hygiene Board of California, and their executive officer addressed that in yesterday's proceedings. AB 1395 and 1396 are related bills concerning the licensed physicians and dentists from Mexico pilot program. AB 1395 has advanced, it's an urgency statute, but the specific changes in this legislation address only the physicians portion of the program, but not the dentist portion of the program. AB 1396 was the non-urgency version of the bill, and because the urgency bill is moving forward, this bill is not at present time. AB 1398 would have made a non-substantive change to the laws concerning the California Dental Corps Loan Repayment Program. That bill did not meet the April 28th deadline to move forward. SB 802 is concerns the notification requirements for situations in which an individual was denied a license based on a criminal conviction. It would require that that notification be done within a certain time frame. The dental board is already in compliance with that deadline, which is not yet in law. And then SB 818 makes a non-substantive change to language with respect to fingerprinting. That again, it's a non-substantive change, so no significant impact on the board at this time. So, are there any questions on any of these bills that I admittedly went through rather quickly?
Any board comments, questions, need further information, discussion on any of these bills? Seeing none, let's go to, you said there were 5 that you
There
wanted
were
to bring up
5.
specifically that we have to take positions on or
We
look at our
believe that the board
Might.
We have positions to recommend on most of these bills,
Okay.
not on all of them. I simply will go ahead in number order with the Assembly bills first before the Senate bills. And the first one would be AB 481 concerning dental assisting. This was discussed in front of the Dental Assisting Council during their meeting yesterday. This bill did pass the Assembly Appropriations Committee and is currently on the Assembly floor. It would make significant changes to the dental assisting chapter of the Dental Practice Act. And among the most significant changes would be to change the number of pathways to RDA licensure. It would be adding 3 new pathways, one for a preceptorship that combines work experience of at least 500 hours with coursework of at least 300 hours. One would be another new pathway would be graduation from an alternative dental assisting program that has at least 500 hours of coursework, in addition to 300 hours of work experience verified by the employer dentist. And the other new pathway would be to hold a current certified dental assistant certificate from the Dental Assisting National Board, DANBY, and completing a course in Pitt and Fisher sealants. There are also changes to the obligations of the employer dentist of unlicensed dental assistants. Requires that employer dentist to make additional notifications to that dental assistant about pathways to licensure and mandatory education requirements. Revises the mandatory course education requirements, that it would retain the 8-hour course in infection control, and consistent with our recently approved legislative proposal, would make that required prior to performing any procedures that were involve exposure to infectious material. 2-hour course in the Dental Practice Act, and the addition would be a 2-hour course in California Division of Occupational Safety and Health bloodborne pathogen training. There would be changes to the duties of orthodontic assistant permit holders, and there would be revisions to the requirements for dental sedation, assistant permit applicants, depending on whether they are an unlicensed dental assistant or an RDA or RDAEF. There are revisions to the permitted duties for unlicensed dental assistants, registered dental assistants, and registered dental assistants in extended functions. And the bill also establishes criteria for courses in interim therapeutic restorations and radiographic decision-making, as well as in infection control. It's a very significant bill. It's been in, there have been a lot of changes. We anticipate more amendments as it goes forward in the legislative process. The new pathways would require the board to develop new forms and processes to facilitate those applications. There are going to need to be changes to our BRIES system. There would, of course, be regulations associated with this bill in whatever the final form of that bill is. Board staff were concerned about the inclusion of the certified dental assistant and how that conforms with the renewal requirements for registered dental assistants. Individuals on the Dental Assisting Council and others have indicated that there is more of an overlap than we had initially anticipated. So that may not be as much of a concern as initially expected. There have been some issues in terms of clarity for provisions of the language. This was discussed at length in the Dental Assisting Council, and I would anticipate a lot of these issues to be brought up during the public comment on this bill. And for instance, specifically, there's a new unsupervised duty with respect to scanning and imaging for records only, and it's unclear as to the viability of that specific provision, but and again, we're going to discuss these situations and concerns. Assurances have been made that there are going to be changes to the bill to address them, but as they have not yet been made, the board staff would recommend a support if amended position on this bill. And so at this point would open it up to board discussion before we proceed.
All right. So, a lot of information in this bill. We heard a lot yesterday for those of us that were Dental Assisting Council meeting. Are there questions or comments or concerns, or where are we on this from the board? I'm seeing nothing. So at this point, I think it would not be inappropriate to take a position. We don't have a position as yet, am I correct?
With the staff is the board is not taking a position on
Okay.
any legislation this year.
What is staff recommending here?
Staff is recommending a support if amended position.
okay.
And, we anticipate those changes would be made, but again, they have not been made yet, so we need to take a position on the bill as it is officially written at this point.
Okay. So I think that makes sense to me. I'm going to move that we support if amended. Is there a second? Dr. Chan, I see, wait a minute. I think Dr. Molina, I owe you one. Do you want to second that one? There we go. We'll let Dr. Molina do that one. We'll be even. All right, so we're going to support if amended is the position that I think we would like to take. And their amendments are coming, and I think CDA is going to get up and speak to that. Is that correct, back there, CDA? Yeah, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I have a comment.
Of course, Dr. Montez.
Yes, so I would like to clarify that once the board takes a position, we then can craft a letter to the legislature noting what our concerns would be, and that I am going, if the board does choose to take a support if amended, I will refer to the comments that were discussed and brought to our attention by the Dental Assisting Council and the concerns that the board staff have raised. So that would be confirming that, and I would put that together on behalf of the board. Thank you.
Okay, very good. With that being said, are there comments by the board relative to a position support if amended, which will give us further direction to take that to the legislature? Seeing none. Public comment. I see Ms. McCune working her way down and some other people, and then we'll deal with each of these independently. Okay.
Hi, Mary McCune with the California Dental Association. I'm not going to repeat a lot of the stuff I said at the DAC. I feel like the DAC report was actually really reflective of the issues and the amendments that we're planning on taking once it hits either Assembly floor or in the Senate. What I do want to mention to the board is that we did take out two provisions of the bill when it was in Assembly Business and Professions, and that was related to changes proposed for the OAP. Specifically, these were around eliminating the PSI examination for OAP applicants, in addition to a new duty for OAP permit holders that would allow for the use of a low-speed handpiece when removing directly bonded materials. And so there were objections from the Dental Assisting Alliance, and so we agreed to remove those provisions, punt it over to the dental board, have them weigh in on it, and if there was agreement or consensus on one or both of those issues, we would go forward and move it back in the bill. So I did want to bring that to the board and have council and staff figure out how to facilitate that conversation if appropriate. And I also want to turn it over to CAO, who is the strong proponent for both of those additions.
Thank you.
Right. My name is Harry Doherty. I'm the president of the California Association of Orthodontists. And I thank you for taking a little bit of public comment here. I think that when we're looking at these, there's lots of changes in dentistry. I think everybody sees that. Changes have been really rapid, especially with digital dentistry. And one of the issues that we have, at least eliminating exam for the OAP program, is that it really doesn't reflect what's being taught. And also there's educational guidelines that really don't reflect what's going on. So a couple things I would think about, I'd like the board to think about, is maybe changing or reviewing some of the educational guidelines to what we're doing in practice now and in how the technology reflects that. The secondary point is with regard to removing material with a high-speed, or excuse me, with a slow-speed handpiece. This is already being done with scalers, and it's also being done with ultrasonics, and it's a short hop to this area. So one of the things that I think I would love to ask the board to consider is maybe reviewing the educational requirements across the board to see that it reflects that. That's one of the reasons why we want to ask that the exam is no longer there, because the exam doesn't reflect the educational requirements, so we're not really in parity there. I look at the exam and I think people try to do the best they can, but we want to make sure that the public interest is protected and that we're really asking people and testing people on what is actually done, and that the educational requirements are relevant to dental practice today, not dental practice a year ago, 2 years, or 5 years ago. So I thank you for the time to comment, and I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. Also, I'd like to talk to Dr. Felsenfeld very directly. Lovely seeing you. I haven't seen you in a little while.
Dr. Dougherty?
Thank you.
A pleasure, sir. Thank you. That's not going to change anything we do, but that's fine. Thank you.
No, but it's always nice to say hello to
Dr.
old
Dougherty
friends.
and I
Thank
go
you.
back a lot of years, so it's good to see you again, sir. Thank you, and thank you for your letter. Okay, Ms. Welch.
I'm a little concerned about timing because it sounds like CDA is requesting for the board's input on some additional amendments, which this board could not actually provide until the August meeting. You know, while we can facilitate conversations and provide recommendations on proposed amendments to bill, staff can. It's only coming from staff. We can't represent that this is a board action unless the board actually discusses and takes a position. So I just want to raise that issue to the extent CDA is anticipating a board discussion or action on these two items. We have to talk about that today, or it will be delayed until August.
Are you going to break the rule of one per person, or do you want me to let you go?
No.
Go for it. That's fine. This will help our conversation.
I'm available for questions. I'm going to sit right there
Okay.
in case there are any. I guess I just wanted to clarify what I was proposing was if there were additional amendments that were responsive to those two OAP issues that you could include in your letter, maybe that would be a better way to work within the confines of the agenda.
That make more sense? Okay. Dr. Dougherty, yes, sir, only because we're all friends.
What I was also proposing is not to make those changes, but let you know that the California Orthodontic Association would be more than happy to work with the board for the educational guidelines. So we would love to help you guys do that at the appropriate time and the appropriate forum. Thank you.
All right. That's public comment. I guess we have to take a vote at this point. I'm sorry. No, I didn't see you step up. Ms. Becker. And then Dr. Ghilardi.
But wait,
next.
there's more. Sherry Becker representing the Alliance. And so the Alliance appreciates CDA's openness in working with us on this bill. And as the current language is published, we still oppose unless amended, and this is around the lab for the infection control portion of that. So we continue to work with CDA on amendments and suggestions to hopefully find a compromise. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Ghilardi?
Thank you. Dr. Lori Ghilardi representing FADE. We are also very appreciative of CDA's collaboration in this bill and the inclusiveness and sensitivity for involving multiple stakeholders. We have two areas related to the bill that we'd like to have our concerns noted. One, that we are supporting CDA's proposal to add an alternative 8-hour infection control course while ensuring education, training, and public protection are central to the outcome. Noting that employees are required to have annual Cal OSHA training, including bloodborne pathogens. There are no total course hours, there are no hands-on elements, and no evidence to suggest the absence of a hands-on or lab component would in any way negatively impact the employee's ability to protect themselves or the public. We also noted that you had concerns regarding the preceptorship and how they would validate their continuing education or their units to fulfill that. Oftentimes we go to workshops that are multiple days and we have one certificate for 80 hours that just lists the content, so maybe it won't be quite as strenuous as you think it may be. The last area was on the CDA pathway to licensure for an RDA. The information in the board packet, we're not quite sure if it accurately reflected it, as it's an eligibility pathway and not necessarily a pathway to maintain both licenses or credentials. We also believe this provides for the military dental assisting workforce in California, those teaching in CODA accredited programs, those working in a veterans dental clinic that must have a CDA to be employable. They could also get an RDA and contribute to the California's workforce. So we, again, encourage you to support this bill if amended, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Glardy. Is there any further public comment? All right, we are ready to take the vote. Dr. Loren, would you read the motion and take the vote, please?
The motion I have is support if amended. That's all I have. Support if amended.
That's correct.
Okay, Dr. Chan? Chan, aye. Aye. Felsenfeld?
Felsenfeld, aye.
Forge? Forge, aye. Larin, aye. McKenzie?
Mackenzie, yes.
McKenzie, yes. Medina, absent. Molina?
Molina, yes.
Molina, yes. Olage?
Olagi, yes.
Olage, yes. Pacheco?
Pacheco, aye.
Pacheco, aye. Thakur? Thakur, aye. And you absent, motion passes.
Thank you. Mr. Bruggeman, would you like to continue on with the next one?
Thank you, I do. The next bill for consideration is AB 936. This is a bill that would extend the eligibility of dental students to participate in sponsored healthcare events from what is currently limited to the final year dental students would become dental students that have entered the clinical training portion of their education. The bill would stipulate that the supervising dentist would be responsible for assessing the ability of these students to address the specific cases that are presented at these healthcare events. The bill has been designated as an urgency statute, which means that it would become effective immediately upon signing. As a trade-off, this means that the bill would need to be approved by a 2/3 majority of each house of each chamber of the legislature. The board staff is not recommending a specific position on this bill, as these events are not typically things that affect the board's operations, but given the nature of the bill and the issue of access to care, we feel the board may wish to weigh in on this legislation.
Okay, is there any board discussion? Once again, I would like to offer that we have an opinion on this bill, and I think we should support it. The reasoning behind it, in my mind, well, let's get a second maybe. Is there a second on that? All right, Alagi, second. The reasoning behind my mind is, yes, we don't look at these types of things generally speaking, but the board has in the past been very active in thinking about access to care. This bill is an extension of something that's already in existence and is about to fall off the table, and they're changing, and the only thing they're changing is clinical years versus year 3 and 4, as I understand it. So, and it is the right thing to do, and I think the optics of this is we should support this. This is going to probably go through very easily, is my guess, but I think we should support this.
Yeah, it is currently on the assembly floor.
Yeah. On a consent? Oh, it's 2/3. I mean,
No,
well, I can still do it.
it's on the assembly floor. It's past the committees that it needs to, and it's simply waiting for a floor vote at this time.
Okay, so they don't use a consent calendar in the assembly?
That's specific to the appropriations committees, and it's
Okay.
already passed that
Okay.
hurdle.
All right. Well, I still think we should support this. So is there any board comment on that? Seeing none, is there any public comment? No, wait a minute. Yes, public comment on that, yes. Seeing none, we're ready to vote. Dr. Loren?
Motion is to support, Chan? Chan, aye. Felsenfeld?
Aye. Felsenfeld, aye.
Forge? Forge, aye. Larin, aye. McKenzie?
Mackenzie, yes.
McKenzie, yes. Medina, absent. Molina?
Molina, yes.
Molina, yes. Olage?
Olagi, yes.
Olage, yes. Pacheco?
Pacheco, aye.
Pacheco, aye. Thakur? Thakur, aye. You absent, motion passes.
Thank you. Continue, Mr. Bruggeman. Everyone's a
Thank
doctor
you.
on this board,
I
as far
always
as I'm concerned.
appreciate credential inflation in all its forms.
It's quite all right, sir. You've been here long enough.
The next bill is AB 1552. This is a bill that was amended in March of this year to address the foreign dental school approval process, and the legislation as written would effectively reinstate the process by which the dental board used to approve foreign dental schools, and essentially set the clock back a few years. And given the nature of the costs involved in addressing the specifics of making sure we have the necessary expertise and the technical teams as stipulated in our own regulations to effectively assess these dental programs and assure that they meet the standards that we wish to implement and set to support the profession and protect the public. We are recommending an opposed position on this bill. As it currently stands, AB 1552 did not meet the April 28th deadline to advance past the policy committee. So we do not expect it to move forward this year, but we do not necessarily believe, there's always a chance that some other bill could be gutted and amended to include these provisions. So the staff recommendation is to oppose.
Okay, we have a recommendation to oppose this bill by staff. Is there any motion or discussion at the board level first, before we make a motion? Seeing none, who would like to make a motion? Mackenzie?
I'd like to make an emotion to oppose this bill.
The motion is to oppose. Is there a second? I think Pacheco is reaching for her microphone.
Pacheco, second.
Thank you very much. We have that. Any further board discussion on this motion? Seeing none, is there any public discussion on the motion or comment? I think Ms. McCune's coming back forward.
I'm sorry. Mary McCune with CDA, in strong support of staff recommendation for this bill. I also wanted to, at this time, remind folks that CDA sponsored a cleanup bill back in 2021 to address some concerns that were brought up by a previous board member earlier in this meeting. The folks that were enrolled at both Moldova and De La Salle at the time of January 1st, 2020 will still be eligible to receive licensure. So I just wanted to clarify that was something that we cleaned up after the passage of AB 1519. Thank you.
Okay, and this bill is looking for the future to resurrect something that was gone.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Any other public comment? Dr. Lorin, I think we are ready to vote. Take the roll, please.
Chan, aye.
Elsfeld, aye.
George?
George, aye.
George, aye. Larine abstain. Mackenzie?
Mackenzie, yes.
Yes. Medina? Absent. Molina?
Lena, no.
Olage?
Olagi, yes.
Olage, yes. Pacheco?
Pacheco, aye.
Pacheco, aye. Thakur?
Thakur, aye.
You, absent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Thank you, Dr. Lorin. Mr. Bruggeman, I think you have some more.
Yes, the next bill is SB 372. This is a little atypical in that the board staff is simply recommending that the board take a watch position on this bill. Dr. Montez can provide additional details on this, but given the specifics of this bill, having an official position lodged by the board would allow the staff to participate in conversations with the department about implementation, which is of concern because of what we're going to describe here. So this bill concerns the access to licensee registration records in instances where there were name and or gender changes, and you have a situation in which there's a potential complaint or enforcement action, and in interest of both preserving privacy and ensuring protection of the public, you want to try and link the records of previous names with current names. And by having an official position on the bill, the board staff would be able to engage with the broader community in making sure that we can walk that tightrope, balance those competing interests as we move forward with the legislation. The legislation also would require establishing a process by which licensees may apply to the board for reissuance of their credentials reflecting these name and gender changes, and that process there could be a fee charged with that process as long as it is not in excess of the same fee that would be allowable for any replacement credentials.
Do we have some discussion? I think Dr. Montez would like to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yes, so again, I just want to emphasize that board staff would need to establish procedures for removing a licensee's former name and gender from the online verification system and to disclose a licensee's current name in connection with a request linked to enforcement action or search of a licensee by a previous name. So the concern here is enforcement and making sure that there is continued public protection. And this is a concern that's been expressed by some of our other boards at the department. And by taking a position, as David mentioned, we can then engage with the author on discussions about this and join the other boards who have also taken positions and are having these discussions. Because the intent is good, but again, for consumer protection, we need to make sure that if an individual is looking to use the services of a dentist or a dental assistant, that they can be confident that there is not enforcement action or history decisions there that have been made.
And to reemphasize here, we're recommending a watch position, which just basically means that we will continue to monitor the bill, does not take a position for or against the legislation, but simply would allow us to engage in further conversations in the way that we think would be mutually beneficial.
WASH is neutral, but it's okay that we could pursue what we need to pursue with that
Exactly.
position. Okay. Ms. Welch?
A few other boards I provide legal counsel to have taken a watch position with concerns. So they've submitted a letter that says they're watching the bill, they support the intent behind it, but there is concern about implementation of the bill with respect to disclosure of the licensee's name, in particular with respect to discipline. Business and Professions Code Section 27 requires the board to post online disciplinary actions. And if it seems like this bill seems to create a conflict with that other statutory requirement to remove the former name from the board's website. So we're just looking for some clarification. We hope to work with the author to figure out an appropriate resolution to ensure that consumers are still receiving important information about their healthcare providers.
Okay, where are we here? We need more board, we don't have a motion on it yet, I don't believe, so we have more comment, anything else?
Well, I just want clarity, so what you're suggesting?
Microphone, please.
I just want clarity, so what you're suggesting is watch with caution as a possible motion, is that what you're?
Watch and express concerns.
Oh, express concerns, okay.
We can take a watch and then we can write a letter to the author saying, we're watching this, but we're concerned about. I think that's the way that works. So if we don't have a position, we don't write letters typically, I assume, right? That's right. So, all right, we good with that? All right, that's the rest of the board comment. Dr. Lirin, do you have some comments? Your microphone is on, but that's from before, okay? Do we have any public comment on this bill? What, I'm sorry, I thought there was a motion, no? Let's make a motion then, thank you. Who would like to make a motion? Ms. Welch can't do that. I'll make it. We make a motion that we watch this bill and a discussion, and Ms. McKenzie has seconded it. Thank you. And we'll, at this point, additional board comment after that, since none, public comment. Seeing none, we're ready to vote. Dr. Lirin.
This, it's to watch. Do you want the and express concerns? Would you
That
like
would
me
be
to
in
add
the
to the
letter, I
motion,
think,
just watch and express concerns?
Is that a position we can take?
Yeah, I guess really it's just taking a position to watch and then communicating or authorizing the executive committee to submit a letter to the board or to the author expressing
That's almost
concerns.
inherent in the way it works here, right? Yes?
Normally it is, but with a watch position, you typically
not.
don't send
All right.
anything, so.
I made that motion. I think we should make it, do we have to amend this one? Please, no. It's watch and express concerns. That's an amendment. All right, Dr. Welch and I are simpatico here. Is there a second to the amendment? Yes, thank you, Mackenzie. Is there any board discussion on the amendment? Is there any public discussion on the amendment? All right, now we can vote. No. Any board discussion on the amended? On the amended resolution, as it were? None. Any public discussion on the amended resolution? No. All right, now we can vote. Dr. Lirin?
Chan?
Chan, I. Felsenfeld.
Felsenfeld, aye.
Felsenfeld, I. Forge. Forge, I. Larin, I. McKenzie.
McKenzie, yes.
McKenzie, yes. Medina, absent. Molina.
Molina, yes.
Molina, yes. Olage.
Olage, yes.
Olage, yes. Pacheco.
Pacheco, aye.
Pacheco, I. Thakur. Thakur, I. And you absent. Motion passes.
Thank you. I think you have one more,
One
Mr.
more.
Bergman.
The amendment?
And then this
Oh.
is,
Oh, no,
all
if,
together?
if
The
you have a
amendment?
point,
That's amended.
was the vote on the amendment?
no, that was done.
That vote was
That was
on
the
the
whole thing.
motion.
Yeah,
All
don't get
right.
me confused.
So the last bill for consideration today is SB 544. This is a bill that would amend provisions of the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act to preserve, for the most part, the procedures that we were able to use to utilize teleconferencing in our meetings during the COVID-19 pandemic. This would permit participation via teleconference. The law would no longer require that all teleconference locations be noticed in the agenda and available to the public, as long as there was a meeting location that was available for teleconference and accessible for the public. There must be a process in place for addressing requests for reasonable accommodations pursuant to the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that process must be advertised during any notice of such meeting. The most recent amendments specify that this does not change anything with respect to posting meeting notices and agendas, but though any remote location which is not being posted would not be disclosed in those meeting agendas or notices either. The only disclosure requirement that would be necessary is if there's an instance where a member is participating from a remote location, which was not noticed, they would be obligated to disclose when anybody 18 years or older are present in the room at the remote location where they are participating and the nature of the relationship between them and that individual. So this was a transparency issue just to address any possible concerns related to conflicts of interest. It's not a scenario that I would anticipate happening in a great number of circumstances. So this is essentially preserving the pandemic procedures we employed with some modifications.
I'm a little confused about one thing you said.
Certainly.
I'm confused about a lot of things, I guess, you said today, but that was one. You said you don't have to disclose your location if you want to be remote.
So if a board member is participating
Yeah,
remotely,
so if
they
I'm
would not
sitting in
need
my
to
home
right,
in Marina Del Rey and I'm not at the meeting,
right.
I still have to tell you who's in the room that's over 18.
If there is someone in the room, not in the building, in the room,
So if my wife is sitting there watching what we're doing,
that would
I'd have
need to
to
be
disclose
disclosed.
that, even though no one who wanted to testify would be able to come to my place if it's not disclosed. Am I understanding that correctly?
No one would, the public would not participate at a non-posted location. That's for certain.
All right.
The issue there is just to make sure that we know everybody, because they are in the room where you're participating in the meeting, technically they are in the meeting as well.
I get it. Okay, I think. Very good. All right, so do we have a recommendation from staff on
I
the position?
apologize. The staff is recommending a support position on the bill.
Support, okay. Is there any discussion? Dr. Chan, I think you're reaching for your, okay, you want to move that? And Ms. McKenzie, once again, is going to say number 2. Is there any board discussion beyond that? Seeing none, I think we need to know, is there public discussion on this? My wife probably would weigh in on it, but she's not here. So, all right, are we good? All right, and in that case, Dr. Lorin, I think this is going to be our last vote for the day. Go for it.
Okay, to support Chan. Chan, I. Felsenfeld. Felsenfeld.
Felsenfeld, aye.
Aye. Forge. Forge, I. Larin, I. McKenzie.
McKenzie, yes.
McKenzie, yes. Medina, absent. Molina.
Molina, yes.
Molina, yes. Olage.
Olage, yes.
Olage, yes. Pacheco.
Pacheco, aye.
Pacheco, I. Thakur. Thakur, I. You absent. Motion passes.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Bergman, we've got one more for you, sir, and that's item 30, discussion of prospective legislative proposals.
So this is the quarterly reminder for members of the board and for the public that they may provide a legislative proposal to the board during any board meeting. But if they're providing it at that board meeting, the board would not be able to act or otherwise respond to that prospective legislative proposal until the following board meeting. For instance, at our previous board meeting, We had a proposal provided with respect to foreign dental schools, and the official response was one of the agenda items from today.
And that's it. Very simple. Thank you, Mr. Brueggemann.
You're
All right,
welcome.
well, thank you, board staff. Board staff works, I'm sorry, public comment on public comment. Seeing none, let's keep going. Thank you, board staff. You guys do a great job and keep us honest, including our attorney. Public attendees, hard days today, but thank you for being here and speaking, and our board members all participated. This concludes the May 18th and 19th, 2023 Quarterly Dental Board meeting. The meeting is adjourned. I love doing that.